Council, and welcome everyone to our March meeting. We seem to be meeting every month rather than every 3 months at the moment, but since we met in fact the day after we met last month, another bout of severe winter weather hit our region, and thanks once again are due both to DG Vost and all the council staff who worked hard gritting and clearing our roads in order to get our region moving during that period of poor weather. Also, I'm very pleased that our youth work team have made Dumfries and Galloway very proud at the National Youth Awards this month, winning both the team award and the individual worker of the year award, which went to Gail Finlay. And I'm hoping that there will be an opportunity to celebrate this great achievement coming as it does in the Year of Young People. It just pays tribute to the great work that our youth team have been doing around the Year of Young People and the degree to which that is actually appreciated by the young people they are working with. Rona, can you give us a Sederunt and any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Leader. We have apologies from Councillors Ian Carruthers, Karen Carruthers, Councillors Dempster, McGregor and Marshall, and members not present at the start of the meeting are Councillors Ronnie and Councillor Scobie.
Right, thanks, Rona. Do members have any declarations of interest in regard of what we're discussing today?
Excuse me, Leader. Councillor Ronnie's put his apologies in, please. Okay, thank you. If we can move to the minute of the meeting on the 27th of February 2018. I move that those minutes are approved as a true record.
Happy to second that, Leader.
Are we agreed? Great. Next item is item 4, which is the Police Scotland Dumfries and Galloway Local Policing Plan. This sets out for members' approval the plan for 2017-2020. Police Scotland are legally obliged to ensure that there are adequate arrangements in place to carry out its duties in each local authority area and to prepare a local policing plan, setting out these priorities of the service in connection with local needs. The Council has been engaged with the development of the plan through a process of consultation, which has involved the 4 area committees and the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee. I think many of us have seen this on more than one occasion already. And the consideration of a response to the draft plan by full Council. The plan now presented is the result of the process and the engagement undertaken. And Andy Reid is here to respond to any questions members may have on the report. So, he's not here. Oh, Derek's got it. Sorry. That was just written in my notes there, sorry. Right. Okay, can we open this up to members' debate? Archie.
Thanks very much, Leader. And we had our police report yesterday, Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee, and it's really with regards local outcome number 5, which is about money and the opportunity, I think, that because of the closures of Royal Bank of Scotland across Dumfries and Galloway, that there is potential for money or door money lenders to be on the increase. And I'm just wondering if the Chief Inspector has anything to say about that. But certainly it's going to be taken away from Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee yesterday to have a look at that, because there is a potential for increase in money lenders on the doorstep.
Thank you. Chief Inspector, I'm sorry I described you as a fire officer. I'm sure you're not telling me.
Maybe you know something I don't, Leader. Thanks, and thanks to Councillor Driver. I was aware that he raised that very astute point yesterday, actually. And Chief Inspector Stiff, who acknowledged it and addressed it yesterday, is actually taking a piece of work away with us to feed into our intelligence processes to reassess the risk based on what the point that you actually made there. I think it is an important point, and we do have a large vulnerable community, and we see that type of crime fairly regularly, unfortunately, in this region. So it is a matter of some concern for us, and anything that increases the risk is obviously going to require a response. So I really appreciate you raising it.
Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Thank you, Leader. I hope the members will agree with me that this new policing plan is a very good document. which through its implementation will continue to improve the service delivered by Police Scotland for Dumfries and Galloway. The plan, as you said, Leader, has been considered by the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee and Area Committees and sets policing priorities and is now closely aligned to local needs and the Dumfries and Galloway Local Outcome Improvement Plan. As Chair of the Subcommittee, I particularly welcome the commitment to community policing and ensuring that our community officers are accessible to the communities they serve. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Chief Superintendent Gary Ritchie and his officers for working with the members to produce this policing plan, and I move that members now agree the plan and also the second recommendation requesting that our local commander continues to work with us to develop a performance reporting template to improve scrutiny of the plan over the next 3 years. Thank you, Leader.
Chief Superintendent.
I'm grateful, Councillor. Thank you very much for your comments and for your support, and also can I just acknowledge the assistance that we received from council staff as well in developing this, because it was quite a tricky process to ensure that that our outcomes and our priorities linked in to the LOIP. But it was a fundamental principle of this plan for me to do that, and we are the first division in Police Scotland to have a policing plan that reflects the LOIP principles to the extent that this one does. So absolutely delighted to be in this position today, and I appreciate Councillor's comments and actually moving for for approval. As for scrutiny, that's something that we've been discussing at Scrutiny Committee for a while now, in terms of how we report based on the principles of the plan and on our local policing priorities. This is something that has been developed nationally, and I understand that the team that's actually developing this on a national basis is intending to go around every division and every scrutiny committee to get opinions and how to have a flexible approach to this that meets local needs, which is the most important thing. So that's work that's ongoing via the Scrutiny Board locally and nationally in Police Scotland.
Thanks for that, and as Chair of the Community Planning Partnership, I'm very pleased that the plan is now aligned to the LOIP, and also interested to learn that we're actually the first local authority area where the police have done that, so that's very gratifying as well. Any further comment? Hi, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Leader. Again, Chief Superintendent, just to compliment you on the plan, it really is a very good read. There was one point that I wanted to highlight following yesterday's meeting at the Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee with Chief Inspector Stiff, and it follows on from Councillor Dryborough's point. It relates to more than just the money side of things. Recently, we were canvassing on the street regarding the RBS closures, and a number of the elderly constituents are extremely worried about how they're going to actually carry out their banking, which predominantly will be online, so it'll be e-banking. Now, in Outcome 2, we're targeting cybercrime, and the emphasis there is on the vulnerable, but emphasising the young and the type of crimes against the young. But I think there's a real potential going forward, and there's a real worry in the community that there's real potential for cybercrime to be committed, which we've already seen in the last few months with the British Telecom incident, the incident with the lady in Rig, which was a separate one, and the one with an athletic football club. So there's some real serious stuff there, and I know it's maybe Central Crime Unit or Fraud Unit that looks at that, but I think within our locality we really have to be aware of this, and it's maybe something that going forward in the plan we can extend that a bit more, because I think that group of people will now become really vulnerable to cybercrime.
Thanks, Councillor. I agree, unfortunately, that they will become more vulnerable to cybercrime, not just because of bank closures, but because of increase in technology and more sophisticated types of operations that target, unfortunately, the vulnerable people in our community. It's a real wicked problem, I think, for every community in Scotland, and particularly an area like this where we have a large proportion of vulnerable people, or people who fall into that category. Addressing vulnerability is a priority for us in all its forms, children and elderly alike. And absolutely, I agree with your sentiment completely, and can just reassure you and council that will be a priority for us going forward, to do the best that we possibly can to ensure that our vulnerable people, know how to protect themselves. And we already have some quite strong relationships with the financial sector and the banks as to how to improve that. And it's interestingly, a number of the cases that we have managed to prevent this year is because of interventions and timely interventions by the financial sector, particularly when there's suspicious activity. So I think all the foundations are there for us to improve that security and to address that vulnerability, and it will be a priority for us for the foreseeable future, actually.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. There was a healthy debate yesterday at Annandale and Estill Area Committee about this, and I think a lot of good points were made, particularly by Councillor Driver and McClelland. I think on what you're saying there is an element of partnership working. I understand that at the recent Adult Protection Committee there was our own trade and standards are in the process of producing a document which outlines the types of financial risk, for example, and the vulnerabilities of our people who are maybe being targeted by telephone scams, etc. And I think that's maybe something we should emphasise, is the partnership nature of how we address these challenges, because as Chief Superintendent has outlined, it is a very wicked problem, and it's going to require more than just one agency's approach. So I'm wondering what kind of work you're doing as we speak in terms of addressing financial risk for our vulnerable with that in mind.
I think the most important, there's longer term work going on, both from the national force in respect to actually building strong links with the financial sector. But that work is actually, although it's based nationally, it's being progressed locally. So therefore we have a local champion here who's actually tasked with reaching out to the financial sector and building up that relationship and those mechanisms that will allow us to identify and intervene, and allow them to identify and intervene. The most important thing for me, though, is to provide information to the vulnerable people in our communities who are likely to be targeted by this kind of attack, and so that they are able to protect themselves. So we're looking at working with through our community councils and our area committees and with our local council partners, and actually providing some structured information over the next few months. Unfortunate thing is sometimes we learn about how these crimes are committed when they are committed. It's very difficult for us to get ahead because of the complexity and the sophistication of the attack or of the crime. But what I'm trying to do is, when a crime happens, then as quickly as possible get that information out to our communities so that people can understand and protect themselves specifically, and just be aware of what type of behaviour to anticipate should somebody contact them by phone, because by phone is obviously the most popular way to actually commit this crime. So that's a work that's ongoing. As I say, it is fairly structured from a national basis, but I'm more focused on actually providing our local communities and vulnerable people in our communities with information as quickly as possible so that they can protect themselves and anticipate any type of attack or attempt to defraud them of their cash.
Okay, so are members happy to agree the report and to request the development of a performance report template for improved scrutiny? Thanks, and apologies again for the wrong designation. Okay, item 5. This is about the transfer of further budgets to the Integrated Joint Board. It advises members of a further transfer of budgets to the Adult Social Work budget under the direction of the Integrated Joint Board from the Social Work budget currently under the direction of the Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Directorate. These were subject to a review to determine if they fell within the scope of the Public Bodies Joint Working Scotland Act of 2014. As members will know, the IJB is now in its second year, and changes in line management and strategic responsibilities for services are evolving. Following a review of activity on the functions that required further consideration, there are a number of functions where the budget should follow the operational and strategic decision-making arrangements and would be better placed with the IJB, conforming to the regulations for delegated services and functions. This essentially is the rationale for the further transfer of budgets to the IJB. The functions that are to be transferred to the IJB are contained within the appendix, and at the 2017 budget level amounted to 1,888,098. The budgets will transfer from the 1st of April. I'm told Sean Barrett is here. I hope he actually is Sean Barrett that's here to respond to any questions members may have on the report, and I invite members to ask questions or make comment. Councillor Driver?
It's more for confirmation, Chair, about the service to transfer and what that budget's actually going to be used for. Obviously, there's some good projects in there that are helping our most vulnerable people in health and physical and mental health needs. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the IGB will take that into consideration with the budget transfer, that these organisations will be looked after.
Thanks, Councillor. The budget, the purpose of the budgets won't change. What we spend them on at the moment, they'll continue to be spent in those areas. The integration scheme and the integrated joint board allows for us to try and spend that money differently and get better value for money and meet outcomes. So it'll be under the guise of the integration joint board to determine how that money is spent in the future, but there's no short-term plans to change where that funding goes at the moment.
Anyone? Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. It's just with regard to the agreed saving of 60,000. Do we know where they're going to find those? Because we might be making a decision today which we don't know what we're actually affecting, and it may come back to bite us on the proverbial in the near future.
I think that would be a matter for the IJB to decide.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. The £60,000 will be identified to be delivered within the scope of these budgets. There are a couple of areas where they could potentially take it from without impacting on any organisations, and then it will fall into the wider budgets delegated under adult social work to deliver. But I don't see, I'm not foreseeing any risk to that saving being delivered.
Right. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Leader. It's with regard to the full amount. Does it have to be transferred as one block, or can we give it in tranches?
The way the budget's delegated to the adult to the integration joint board are still monitored and controlled by the local authority. So these budgets actually still sit within the local authority. It's just the way we monitor for the integration joint board is we join the NHS ledger with the council's ledger, and it's almost a paper exercise. So the budgets actually still sit within the local authority. The local authority still monitors. It's the operational strategic decision making which is taken by the integration joint board. So there's actually not a physical shifting of funds.
Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I'm just wondering what the arrangements are for feeding back to the council from the integrated joint board. A lot of these things will affect the people that we represent, so we still expect that.
Yes, I'd be interested in that, because there was also a mechanism advised at social work in terms of reporting to social work committee about decisions taken or to be taken by the IGB, and I wondered, we'd be interested, I think, to hear whether there's similar mechanisms for SIPL and indeed for the next item in communities.
I wonder if I could answer this, Leader. That's acceptable. The monitoring and management of these services within this element of the report will go through the clinical and care governance, and clearly social work has agreed that would be the reporting mechanism.
So they will go back to social work committee rather than SIPL?
Yes, it will, Leader. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Chair. Should members of the IGB be here debating this? or should they declare an interest and leave?
Ask Rona to answer that.
No, there's no need on these matters to declare an interest. There's a special dispensations being given by the Standards Commission on issues involving the IGB and the councils.
Any further? Any further questions on the report? In that case, are we content to note the transfer of the budgets from SIPL okay to the IJB? Okay. Okay. Item 6 is similar. The purpose of this report is to seek the agreement of the Council to transfer the funding to deliver the care and repair, small repairs and home support service, food train extra and dementia-friendly design project to the Integrated Joint Board for 2018-19. Council's Communities Committees endorsed these recommendations at its meeting on the 6th of February and agreed to refer them to full Council for agreement. This is because the Communities Committee doesn't have the delegated authority to agree to transfer the budgets to the IJB, and the annual review of the Dumfries and Galloway Health and Social Care Partnership budget is a matter reserved to the full Council, and Jim O'Neill is here to speak to the report if members have questions or comments. Councillor Blake.
Chairman, thank you. It was rather remiss of me, the declarations of interest earlier. I just want to look at it in a bit more detail with respect to recommendation 2.2 and also paragraph 3.2, the care and repair service. I'm personally currently under an assessment for that programme, and it's under the consideration of the occupational health, the head of staff. So if, with your permission, I'll remain, because it would take me so long to get it out, but I will not take part in that discussion.
I don't think there would be any reason why you would have to leave anyway. It's just a transfer of budgets. Councillor Driver.
Again, Chair, it's just to say that the organisations that these funds are doing a magnificent job out there with a lot of volunteers, and just to make sure that the service continues in that respect. And if that consideration that we will get feedback to communities on what the money is being spent on, that would be ideal.
Okay, Jim. Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. It's kind of building on Archie's point and a couple of other members that have had questions regarding the last report and this report. I think the changes being proposed, in my mind, should come with a warning. As up to now, it's been recognised that the governance hasn't been fit for purpose, and there's still a lot of work to do within that. As more of the budgets are being transferred to the IGB, the more and more responsibility it has. But this isn't actually reflected, in my mind, in the governance that's going through the IGB. I mean, we recently saw the closure of a Lockside Dental Clinic, where the IGB didn't seem to be clear in its role. And now we have a consultation that, to try and close the Acorn House as part of a review, but there hasn't been a single paper to the IGB granting that authority to carry out the review. If we're going to make integration work, then we need to sort out the governance and have a firmer hand on that. Thanks.
I don't know whether Jim has any...
There was a comment.
All right, okay. Just to advise that Councillor Davidson and I and the Chief Executive and the Chief Social Work Officer have been in conversation with the Health Board about some of these issues around governance, and we would hope to see some progress. In terms of the consultations, that the full Council will now get sight of consultations, the opportunity to respond to consultations. So I hope that some of the issues which have been faced in the past, in particular around the dental clinic, may be better handled in the future.
It would be helpful to say one of the key agreements that was reached at the meeting was that following on from the report that went to social work, which has clarified for members how the assurances on the statutory duties of the council will be fulfilled back to the social work, that we agreed that moving forward, that the full list of the strategic reviews planning to be undertaken that would fall within the remit of either the Health Board, the Council and the IJB would be laid out and agreed, so that there's a clear sight on the work programme and any reviews that would allow the initial scopes of those reviews to be agreed before work is undertaken. I think that was one of the key issues that failed in the past. We're also going to be undertaking other work and mapping all of the responsibilities and decision-making processes, even down to those that are regarded as operational, and bring that back to members for consideration and oversight. So we will be undertaking that work in the next couple of months, led by the Chief Executive of the NHS. So therefore, that should hopefully allow members to be cited on the issues and perhaps make recommendations for improvement if they see fit. So we're bringing that back to members at a future date, hopefully before we go to recess.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thanks, Chief Executive. Councillor Maitland.
I welcome both the remarks made by Councillor Nicholson and the Chief Executive. I've always felt that this was funneled down to, in some ways, too small a number of elected members, but we had nothing to do with that. That was dictated by further up the line. I do absolutely welcome what the Chief Executive has said in respect of bringing more information to a wider number of members. But I would also say the fact that we have this legislation and the IJB exists, in fact, means there is now scope to get involved in the sort of things that, if members remember back from years back, dental provision right across the region, nothing came to us at all. We suddenly found ourselves with GP surgeries and dental issues being put in front of our constituents with which we had absolutely nothing to do at all. This gives us an opportunity to have a way of expressing our opinion through a structure, and I think that's absolutely to be welcomed.
Okay, any further? No. Oh, yes, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I appreciate this is a lot of these projects, or the budgets which we're delegating, are for projects which we as a council agreed to support, and there's an associated budget with that because we want those projects to achieve certain outcomes that benefit our constituents. Once we've agreed to delegate that, how much influence does the IJB then have in determining, actually, we found a better way of delivering those outcomes, so it won't be those particular projects that get supported, the same monies will be used to commission a different service to supply those. So it's really just to understand the timeline for how the IJB would influence the future delivery of outcomes rather than specific project deliverers.
Jim.
Pardon me, sorry. I'll start that again. As I mentioned previously, there's a steering group in place that oversees the delivery of the services. When the services are transferred over, it will be to fund those set out in the report. They're either the subject of contracts or service level agreements with the providers, and there is no scope for the money to be transferred over and the IJB to fund them or use the funds in a different way. As Sean Barrett, the finance officer, outlined, the money doesn't actually physically transfer over, and Sean sits in the steering group that I made reference to, and it's all about working in partnership to deliver these services rather than transferring money that could be used for another purpose. And that is a kind of a fair agreement and understanding between the council and the IJB.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So when the contract is up or reviewed, effectively, it would be the council that would decide which services, and then the IJB would spend the money that we've delegated?
What we'd expect is that if you think about it, you have the IJB, and below that you have the integrated partnership, which is effectively the engine room of it. So that partnership, maybe I will say we wish to commission something, that would then come back through the council processes for members' consideration. So there'd be no automatic right for that partnership to decide something. So therefore, and as part of the mapping that I've referred to, we will map that decision-making process with perhaps a couple of worked examples for members, because these are exactly the type of confusion that's been playing out there. So that will include that. But yes, it would come back through the recommendation of the group that Jim's referring to for members' consideration before we would then transfer the next tranche of money across. So therefore, we'll map that process for members so it's very clear how that would work.
Councillor Ferguson and then Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Leader. Just to remind everyone as well, in actual fact, the IGB could make the decision, for example, to
say we think there should be more money at 15 than 15,000 at 2.5. I'm only using that as an example. So that strategic direction could come back from the IGB to actually spend more money rather than less. So it's a two-way process, and I think we need to just understand that. This is a procedural paper rather than the nitty-gritty.
Councillor McCall.
Thanks, Leader. Which body will actually monitor the spending of these budgets?
Thanks, Chair. The spend's monitored through the Council ultimately. We've got a good understanding of what's happening throughout the financial year, and the steering group receives regular financial updates in the current position, so it's monitored throughout the year. And as I said, Sean Barrett, the finance officer, sits in the steering group that I referred to. But the budget and service responsibility is a matter for the IGB. And again, to pick up on the Chief Executive's point, it's Communities Committee that agree the budgets that are transferred on an annual basis. So the amount of budget in the service that those are directed to is an annual decision through the scheme of assistance for the Council, and then we monitor it in a partnership way going forward.
Thanks. Oh, Councillor McCall.
Will there be a report back to the Communities Committee?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The scheme of assistance is an annual report that's taken to Communities Committee generally around February or March time, and it's at that time members can agree to fund the services or not, and they can also agree the level of funding that's applied to those services or not. But however, these are long-standing services, and I think the report that went to Communities Committee and this report indicates the large number of good outcomes they achieve for people in the region. And in terms of the kind of joint working arrangements between the Council and the IGB, they play a huge role in maintaining people at home, keeping people out of high-cost care environments, and preventing admissions to hospital. So in terms of value for money, I think they play a key role in terms of delivering the prevention agenda.
Thank you. I think that's a very helpful piece of information. Thanks. Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Jane Maitland made the point about the size of the IGB committee. That was only 5 elected members from this council on it, and 5 members from the health board. It's far too small for the amount of work that's got to be done by that committee. Even to the stage now where they are implementing I call it a difficult decisions body, which is a group of officers who make the difficult decisions. That takes away from democracy all the way, and I just don't understand it, and I think it should be looked into.
I think all these are being investigated at the moment through our work with the health board. So take on board what you're saying, but I don't think it necessarily affects the decision for this particular paper, which actually will be decided on an annual basis by the Communities Committee. So the problems about accountability maybe don't arise to the same extent on this particular issue as they do in some of the others. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. You're handing over the money, you're handing over to the IGB, you're handing over the service delivery to the IGB as well. And I think that's why it's very important to have proper governance and scrutiny and everything else in place when we're doing these. So I think I welcome some of the comments.
I think in this case, that where community is not content with how the funds have been spent this year, they could decide next year not to transfer the funds. I think I'm right.
Yep, thanks, Chair. The amount of funding is agreed on an annual basis. The amount of funding available to the Council, either through its settlement with the Scottish Government or the income achieved through council tax and second homes, isn't a fixed position, and it's really important that members are given the opportunity to re-examine the priorities for spend on an annual basis, but also decisions are made that reflect the actual amount of money that's available. So, as I mentioned before, we go back every year to ask members to agree to fund these services based on the resources that are available.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks again, Leader, for letting me in. Just to go back to the Chief Executive's willingness to provide some worked examples about this, because I think, I mean, it certainly seems to me, and I'm certainly guilty of this as well, that I don't fully understand this, and I could always do to understand it better. So I'd really welcome some form of worked example to put it into real terms in terms of us as councillors being able to scrutinise what money is getting spent on and how we're deciding what we do. And I'm sure we'll take more comfort from knowing how that works if it's laid out in a way we can understand. Thank you.
I think the Chief Executive's committed to that. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I think Stephen's absolutely right, because whilst we're handing over the budget and we've laid out what we want delivered in them budgets, it's not necessarily the same people that would deliver them services within the IGB. That would be up to IGB to decide what was the most effective way to deliver these services that we contract for. It's like everything else, it's if it's home care or whatever like, and we want a service put out, and this is what we expect from that contract. If you want that agreement, then the delivery mechanism then becomes IGB. So you could have the handy van, for example, delivering a service, but they might find an optimal way of delivering them services, in my mind, that they can then take that decision of how the services are delivered, as long as it comes to that outcome. Is that? But it'd be worthwhile having that kind of layout.
Jim.
Yep, thanks, Chair. I mean, the arrangements that are in place to oversee the delivery of these services are based in kind of long-standing partnership arrangements with staff within social work and the NHS. And to be absolutely clear, what the money will be applied to are the services outlined in the report. If there were going to be any changes made to those services, then my clear understanding is that request would be made through me in terms of my role in the steering group, and that would be taken back through Communities Committee for agreement and discussion in that forum, rather than decisions being made independently through the IJB. And that's certainly the way it's operated in the last 2 or 3 years. And there are very strong partnership arrangements in place and a clear understanding of how we go about these things. So I'm absolutely confident that the money will be spent as agreed by members.
Thanks for that, Jim. You use the words understanding and partnership and things like that. That doesn't. It's not an actual contract situation. So I think there is room to have that clarified. What actually happens, what could happen.
I'm getting a bit confused now as well, actually, because I thought the Communities Committee had actually commissioned these services. Is my understanding incorrect?
The Communities Committee does commission the services, but they're a mandatory transfer over to the IGB through the health and social care regulations. So the Council's required to transfer the budgets and the operational delivery of those services to the IGB, but the Communities Committee on an annual basis agrees the priorities for spend and whether to continue the current arrangements or not.
But I think the point I was trying to reach for my own understanding is that if the Communities Committee commissions these services from these providers, they will be commissioned for a period of time, for a year or whatever, and that therefore the IJB wouldn't be able to break that commission, surely?
No, the IJB wouldn't be able to break that commission, but I think the point that I was trying to make is that we work very closely with colleagues in the IJB, and there is a clear understanding that if change was required, it would need to be taken through Communities Committee and be considered by members in the first instance.
Okay, members. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks very much. This was actually delegated to communities quite rightly, and this was actually discussed at great length in the February meeting, and recommendations came from there as are outlined in this plan, in this agenda item today. As I say, this is a procedural paper required under the Act.
Can I just clarify that last comment, delegated to Communities Committee? Yeah, I thought we were getting a recommendation here from Communities Committee for the council to
Yes, we
decide.
are, yes. Okay, is everybody content? Any further? People's concerns allayed, and that any changes to the commission would come back to the Communities Committee for Communities Committee's agreement before the IJB would be able to alter the commissions. Everybody's happy with that? Okay, are we happy therefore to note the funding recommendations considered by the Communities Committee and were recommended to be referred to the Council for agreement? So we have to note that first, and then we're happy to note that, and then I'm not going to read out each of them. The 2, 3, 4 and 5 are to agree to the transfer of particular commissions to the IJB for the annual basis. Okay. Okay. Item 7 is the report by the Head of Finance and Procurement on the Council's financial strategy. Provides members with information on the Council's updated 5-year financial strategy following agreement of the Council's budget for the 3-year period from 2018-19 to 2021. And Paul Garrett is here I keep checking that person I expect is actually here, is here to speak to the report, and I invite comment and questions from members. Councillor Wilson and Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. Just looking at the table on page 343, table 2, I'm just wondering why in particular are we expecting a larger reduction in funding in the 1920 financial year compared to the financial years following that?
Thank you.
This year was quite a unique year in terms of the level of reduction of settlement that we've received. You'll remember that we received some funding very late on in the financial year. If we go back a couple of years, in 2016-17, we actually received a reduction of 13.2 million, which was over 4%. And then the following year, it was reduced down to 9,580. But the original figure that we had for that year was also 12.451, which was then reduced by another second settlement. So although it might seem large, quite a large increase in comparison to this year, well, the 18-19 upcoming year, it is in line with other indications of prior years that we've had just previously.
So basically, although we got a bit of a better settlement than what we're expecting this year, we'll really pay for it and suffer for it next financial year?
There's no indication that the funding that we received as part of the settlement late on in this year, the Stage 1 budget bill, will actually continue within there, and there's no indication at the moment whether there'll be an increase or an improvement in the overall level of resources going forward.
Guess we don't know what the Tiggerish Mr Hammond will be considering in his budget. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. It was with regard to recommendation 2.2. We've to note that there's 47.668 million reduced to 30.215 with the decisions we've already taken. Now that reflects the figures within 3.14 and the part there, and the above figures are based on mid-range estimates reflected at Appendix 1. Appendix 1 adds up to 48.64 million. Where's the £1 million difference from?
Okay, can you answer that?
Whereabouts?
It's page 348, Table 6, Summary of Mid-Range Financial Projections.
Thanks, Councillor. We'll check the figures, but I think the difference is there was £971,000 of policy development funding added in the budget as part of the 2017-18 agreement. So that seems to be similar to the difference. So we'll just confirm that and come back to you.
It is basically 48.6.
So that's right.
Yes.
Okay. So that is correct. Yes.
Yeah. I wonder if you could repeat the explanation, because colleagues were having difficulty in following it. Thanks.
Just to say, the difference is members, as part of the 2018-19 budget agreement, added in policy development funding of £971,000. That's the difference between the two figures. We'll just make sure there's complete consistency there, but that's the difference.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay. Malcolm Johnson, sir.
Thank you, Leader. £30 million is a large amount of money, obviously, to save, and we're referring here to a modernisation programme, which is, well, it's going to have to be an extensive modernisation programme. But where I'm getting to is on section 4.3, bullet point 5, we refer to a smaller, more flexibly skilled workforce. Now, is this going to be possible just relying on ERVS, or is it going to put our compulsory redundancy, no compulsory redundancy policy into question? Because to save 30 million, you're really looking at losing 800 staff, or more than 800 staff.
I think we would be looking at measures other than just losing staff, but certainly it's the policy of the administration that there should be no compulsory redundancies. I ask for any further clarification regarding how we might achieve such massive savings. Obviously, it's something that we intend to work through. I mean, that we will be bringing forward proposals as to how we address finding these savings over future years.
I think the key point to add to that is, as you say, it will only be partly made of staff savings. That £30 million target will be a range of measures that members will look at, but effectively at the end of the day, it will all be down to member decision making.
Thanks. I think particularly on that point, the advice I always receive from officers is that council staff know that it's challenging times ahead, but actually our policy of having no compulsory redundancies just helps us sort of, meet that sort of safety need of employees that the council has, to ensure that actually they're not going to risk losing a job, even though uncertain times are ahead. And I think it's a right policy that we continue with.
Thank you. Further comment? In that case, are we content to note the financial strategy, note that the estimated funding gap, but hope perhaps that it will not be as severe as that? Right, so you're happy to note recommendation 1? Note recommendation 2. Are we content to agree that senior officers should seek to develop a savings proposals to this value based on the agreed modernisation programme? Agreed. And to note the financial strategy will be continued to be regularly reviewed, and that we'll get future updates when key assumptions are subject to change. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is the Treasury Management Statement, which has already been to Policy and Resources. It provides members with details of the Treasury Management Strategy for the upcoming financial year and the prudential indicators supporting the Council's agreed capital investment strategy. And Paul is again here with Andrew to speak to the report if we have any questions. Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't actually get to this section until about midnight last night, which was a shame to not really do it justice, because it was a very well written document, and I'd like to congratulate the authors on a real page turner, especially exciting when you get to figures of over 400 million. I've noticed that the council over the previous councils have borrowed in a sort of Gordon Brown-like fashion while the sun was shining. And the current administration seems to have front-loaded the debts and burdened administrations to come. And as a result of our debt burden, we annually are now having not enough money to repair roads, etc., because we've got to service these debts going onwards. But, I suppose the implication here is that it is in some way sustainable. But crises come when you least expect them, and I thought, well, what might be in the horizon, what might come, and I thought of the sort of nightmare scenario of another referendum, which could possibly lead to an independent Scotland. And believe it or not, there's still people in this room who are openly advocating that should happen. At the last referendum, there was a sort of I don't know, it was mooted in a woolly sort of fashion that Scotland might stay with the pound. Having lost the referendum, I suppose they'd have to restate that somehow or come up with a new idea. As I understand it, there's no way an independent Scotland could get in the Eurozone because it couldn't meet the requirements. So we'd be left with a local currency, which I'll call the Mac Drachma, which wouldn't be a hard currency, but our debts would be in a hard currency, which would the pound sterling. So I wonder if the authors of this report are going to have actually thought about having a sequel where they'd have contingency planning for debt and default, which could occur due to a number of circumstances, but perhaps the one I've outlined particularly. Thank you.
I think Councillor Davidson has a point to make on this issue.
I was going to very gently suggest to the member that he might wish to examine these reports in the morning rather than at midnight. Obviously, clouds his judgment and analysis somewhat, but perhaps the officers will be able to dig something meaningful out of it to answer.
Yes, I'm not quite sure how much of that question can be answered by officers at the moment. It does seem to be based on speculation about a referendum result and what the currency might be thereafter, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson and Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I obviously go to bed a bit earlier than Councillor James, but I must admit it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I would just like a wee bit of clarity, if I could, please. I'm looking at the authorised borrowing limit, and I took the opportunity to actually read the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, Section 35, and I would like to try and find out how this figure of the authorised limit has been calculated. Is it based on some sort of mezzanine finance or percentage of income? I can't actually figure out how it's done. I know it's down to the council just to authorise the limit, but I would just like a wee bit of clarity as to how it's actually calculated.
I think that might be an easier question to address.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. The authorised limit is basically the limit which we can borrow before we've got to come back to the council to report any breaches. It's based on the operational boundary, which is what we expect what we require to use in a year, along with a buffer. We've got a £10 million buffer plus another 5% on top of that. The authorised limit takes into account future spending plans. So the capital plan for the next 2 years, if we feel that interest rates will rise substantially, it may be the case that we borrow up to 2 years in advance to fund the capital programme. So the authorised limit takes account of that additional borrowing requirement, and basically it's something that we must stay within before we've got to come back to the council to report.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So my interpretation of that then is that we decide how much money we need, and then we add a wee bit on as a safety net, is that? It's as simple as that. It's got no relation to affordability or anything of that nature.
It's based on the agreed capital programmes and taking account, there's buffers in for cash flow positions, etc. There are times during the year where we've got to borrow to cover future receipts. So we've got bits and pieces in for that as well. But it is the current level of debt plus operational, a buffer for operational purposes, plus an allowance for the next 2 years capital programme.
Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor James again, and Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I've never heard every Tory soundbite in one speech before, so I suppose that's always something to take from this morning. It's my understanding that actually, as a council, we're in a much better financial position in terms of borrowing across the whole of Scotland. And it's my understanding that, as the answer to Councillor Johnson's point's been made, actually we're quite within our, below the limit, and that we are in a much better position than many other councils right across Scotland, and that it's something that we need to do to be able to invest in our infrastructure, like the new schools that we've built, like the roads that are being repaired, and that to continue to be able to do that, we do require a little level of borrowing.
We, in comparison to other councils, we do have a relatively low level of debt at the moment. That's certainly the case. We also pay less than the average rate of interest on our debt, so they're both positive things. We have got quite a significant increase in our borrowing reflected in the current capital investment strategy, which will see that borrowing increase over upcoming financial years. But you've taken that into account in your planning of both the capital strategy and the revenue budget, and we'll continue to monitor that on an ongoing basis.
Thank you for that. And on a personal basis, it's a little like when you decide whether or not to take out a mortgage or not, you have to assess whether or not you can repay the mortgage payment. So it's on a much grander scale, it's something similar. Councillor Jane, sorry? Yeah, okay. You want to come back on that point?
Yeah, basically I fully understand that, and I do understand about our debt levels, but you're saying it's like borrowing money to buy a house. But this is like borrowing money to buy a house where you decide yourself how much your borrowing limit should be. Normally most people go to the bank. That was really what I was trying to establish.
I understood there was some limit though, isn't there? There's a prudential limit councils can't go beyond. So we're nowhere near that prudential limit because we know that it would have revenue consequences for us if we borrowed up to that limit. But I think there is a limit beyond which we cannot borrow further.
Yes, I think the important thing is that you look at your revenue budget, which reflects the cost of your borrowing. You look at your capital investment strategy, which reflects your required borrowing. But you also look at the potential indicators at the same time. Those are fully reflected in this strategy. They show how you're accommodating the cost of your borrowing within your overall finances and your financial strategy. So as long as those continue to be integrated in terms of revenue budget, capital strategy, and potential indicators, that's the key approach to ensuring the affordability of your programme going forward.
Thank you. Councillor James, you wanted back in.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Chair. On the point you've just answered, I wasn't sure how independent that scrutiny was, but going back to my original question, I think it is valid that we should have contingency planning for a very rainy day, which may come at any time. We know not when. I mentioned the threat of independence. Even leading up, if there was a serious threat of independence, there might be a flight to quality. We'd find it very difficult to borrow in Stirling leading up to that, in my opinion. But as we're, as authority, very near our self-set limits, I think we should have a contingency plan. What do you think?
Our strategy reflects a range of plans for different scenarios. We do take into account potential changes, taking into account the best information available at present. We do have advisors. We also use a range of indicators to support our plans, but we do look at potentially changed situations going forward and continue to monitor them. We didn't go into details in terms of some of the scenarios you discussed earlier on, but we do have continuous contingency planning for things that may change, and we'll continue to reflect that in our updated strategies as we go forward. Sorry?
Are they in the report?
I think what's in the report is a reflection of our current advisory arrangements, the approach we take to setting our investment strategy. Also look at some of the counterparties we deal with and some of the risks associated with them. If we feel as though there's significant further things that we need to reflect in our strategy, we'll certainly bring those forward, but we think we've covered those adequately at this stage, but we'll continue to monitor that.
Councillor Hislop, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Charters.
Maybe heading back into possible scenarios. I noticed that we have an under borrowing of capital with gross debt being less than the capital finance requirement. And the capital financing requirement addresses other long-term liabilities. Now, in there's PFI schemes, finance leases. What would happen if one of our PFI schemes was to go bang? Would that have a significant effect on our capital project and our revenue budget?
I think I know where you're probably coming from. Hand over.
Potentially, yes. It's something that we're looking at in terms of planning various scenarios at the moment. We've taken into account in our plans the potential for change. We haven't made significant changes in the figures reflected in the report at the minute, but we'll continue to work with relevant service on both the PPP and the PFI project to see if there's any significant changes we need to bring back to members.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Charters.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's interesting to hear the discussion so far. I understand that, I think from the back of Councillor Johnson's point, I think there is a valid question about the appeal to an external authority, if you like, in terms of setting a limit, but from what the answers seem to be, is we are effectively the authority that sets our own limit based on prudential considerations, which is fine, because I'm sure there are councils elsewhere in the UK which have effectively gone bankrupt because they've failed to stay within prudential considerations, and I'm sure there's probably examples of that. I don't know if there's any in Scotland, but I believe there's some in England. And in terms of planning for crises, I think we're kind of, it appears that we're walking towards certainly an unknown within the next couple of years, which I understand was the last referendum we were faced with, where Scotland voted one way and we're getting delivered something else. So I think there's crises on the horizon which are far beyond any theoretical independence referendum, and certainly one that's very actual and we're going to have to deal with, which has very real ramifications and risks. So I'll just leave that as a comment.
Thank you. Councillor Charters?
Oh, okay. I find these figures, I mean, they're either terrifying or they're merely worrying. But, I mean, they are enormous sums of money, enormous sums of money. Yeah. And I go back to what Councillor Hislop was saying about the CFR, the council borrowing need, which we identify. Now, that need we can probably afford at the moment because interest rates are very, very historically low, and therefore borrowing money is relatively cheap. But we've all lived in times where interest rates have been up as far as 15%. I mean, we would simply not be able to afford this level of borrowing of £410 million of the CFR, which we're asked to approve now. Yeah. And we're basing this on a financial situation which is benevolent to borrowers. And we've got to be very, very careful that we don't take advantage of that, because eventually this money is going to have to be paid back, and not necessarily at the very low rates which we're experiencing at the moment. Because you've only got to turn the page up to 360, and you'll find in there that the Treasury indicators the limits to borrowing activity. The total there is 385 million. So we're not getting very far from where our limit is. And if you looked further down, the Council will be asked to approve the following authorised limit. Yeah. And that total is 461 million. Now, I don't see how, if anything went wrong in the way that money is managed, where we borrow our money from, and the interest rates start rising rapidly, and we've got an indication it's going to happen this year in September, that we're looking for interest rates going up as far as 2%, whether we're really being prudential. This word prudential worries me enormously, because I don't think we're being prudential, and we're ramping up our borrowing by putting up our self-imposed limits. And we're talking about £461 million. I mean, how on earth are we going to start paying the interest on that if it's at a 2 or 3%? We're basing this on a completely different set of figures. And I think we should be, quite honestly, I find these figures terrifying, not worrying. Maybe people say, well, it's okay, we'll plod along as usual. But the day of reckoning will come. And we've got to be very careful that we are ready for that day of reckoning and that we have been prudential, which I don't think we're being at the moment.
You could explain, I mean, my understanding is that interest rate changes are included in your considerations, but maybe you could say a bit more to hopefully reassure Councillor Charters as to how the Council would deal with situations where interest rates started to rise.
Obviously, in the current scenario, there are just talks about interest rates rising. A base rate rise is expected in May, following and another base rate rise expected in November, possibly. What we do have is the fact that the vast majority of our debt is fixed for several years. So any increases in base rates, etc., will have it will have an effect, but it will not be a significant effect on what the interest that we pay going forward. I think that the table on 370 shows the maturity profile of the external debt we have at present. Again, it's reflected in the graph on Annex 2. So the vast majority of our debt is not due for repayment until well into the 2040s. So up till that time, I mean, we'll obviously... I mean, it's like the leader said. I mean, this is basically a series of mortgages. We do make provision for the repayment of all this debt, and we do take account of future rate increases. But we do have the, I wouldn't say satisfaction, but we do know for certain that the vast majority of the interest that we will be paying on servicing this debt is fixed for the foreseeable future.
Which can be a disadvantage when the interest rates go down. In fact, I think we have been disadvantaged from that, from the fixed rate element with some of the loans from the Public Works Loan Board, which are actually at a higher level than if we were borrowing on the open market at the moment. I'm right in that.
I mean, obviously, a lot of the loans that are falling out in the next 10, 20 years have been either taken by the council or its predecessors in the last 20, 30, 40 years. So, I mean, we do still have debt running at 8, 9%, but we're waiting for it to fall out naturally. There are penalties to try and come out of these things early.
Thank you. I outlined one set of circumstances that may occur that would damage our rating, but may I ask what our credit rating is? Are we a sort of so-called AAA risk at the moment? And if councils within the UK, it doesn't have to be in Scotland, start to go bankrupt and maybe default, would that affect our rating? And would that adversely affect our ability to borrow at attractive rates?
Okay, the UK government is no longer AAA, but perhaps you could answer for Dumfries and Galloway Council.
The council itself doesn't have a credit rating. There are 1 or 2 councils in the country who do, but these tend to be the ones who issue their own bonds onto the market. As to our ability to borrow money, we have the PWB facility, which is in the Bank of England. They have no restrictions on what we do, as long as it's within our agreed prudential indicators, etc. And the local government market as a whole is seen as fairly secure. I mean, the local government does have tax raising powers. It is backed by the government, etc. So, in close up, we don't have a credit rating as such, but councils as a whole in the country are seen as very good risk.
Councillor Hislop and Councillor Dryburn.
Thank you, Leader. I think it was during the last council, I attended a seminar on, I think it was the capital borrowing that we do and how we do our prudential indicators, etc., etc. Now, there was 2 parts to it. I was able to stay for the first half, which was the part about the capital prudential stuff. I found it very helpful, and I was just wondering if we could repeat that, because there was a lot of information in that seminar, and I didn't glean all the information I could have. I got as much as my tiny brain will hold, but I think if there was an opportunity to have something like that again, it would be good for members.
That sounds a very sensible suggestion. I think that they'll try and take that one forward. I think it should benefit all of us, I think. Councillor Dryburn.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's really interesting, some of the scrutiny that comes out of these reports for some members. I think the issue of this particular part of the Treasury managing strategy is part of the full council strategy, and we need to take that into context, because we have to pay for things that perhaps we have to borrow for, but we also have revenue budgets that we have to agree as well. I'm a bit concerned about hearing about the the council that went bankrupt. It is actually, in fact, Northamptonshire that went bankrupt. And there are 7 other Tory councils round about that particular area. If you want to look on the horizon in the next few months, that the problems could occur. And that's because their chief execs outsourced everything from the council. And when it comes to the day of new contracts, some of those outsourced departments say, I'm not having nothing to do with it. We get this information through the Association of Public Service Excellence. And it was funny that, you know, when you look at the funding from government in England and Wales, the reduction has been such a way. It was the Tory MPs in that particular area that wanted rid of that Tory council. In actual fact, there's only one other council in that area that's actually running a massive and in the black sort of book, and that is the 33rd Scotland Authority of Corby. And I'm really pleased that they are getting on with the work that a Labour council and joint with their independent colleagues has done. So I think it's about time that, you know, when you look at this Treasury management as part of the overall strategy for the council, that perhaps the Tories can get rid of their abacus out of the room and get a calculator in, because it is subject to human error.
I think we've had a very sensible suggestion that we have a member seminar to discuss some of these issues further, and I think perhaps some of the other things could be discussed at that point. So at this stage, are we content to agree the Treasury Management Strategy Statement? Agreed? Okay. And this wasn't really discussed in question, but are we content to agree that the increase from 20 million to 25 million on the counterparty limit within the Council's bank should be done on a permanent basis rather than the temporary basis that we had agreed before? Are we happy with that? Okay. And are we then content to note that both the prudential indicators and the Treasury management activities will be subject to continual monitoring, and indeed that we'll learn more from a members' seminar in due course? Okay, thanks. Okay, let's move on to Item 9, which is the amendment of a scheme of administration. This report asks members to consider an amendment to the scheme of administration and delegation to committees, following its consideration by the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee at its meeting held on the 13th of March. This amendment is necessary to ensure that council procedures comply with the relevant legislation in relation to where authorities lies to consider reports from the Standards Commission into matters of members' conduct. Nick Evans is here to assist with any questions that the members may have on the report. Do members have any questions? Have any questions? Are we content to agree the recommendations of the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee and amend the scheme of administration? Great, thank you. Okay. Then we now come on to a written decision of the Standards Commission panel. This report is required to be considered by full council and concerns the findings of a Standards Commission hearing panel regarding a complaint against former councillor Tom McCautry. Nick Evans is here to assist with any questions members may have on the report, and I invite members to, if they have any questions on the report. If not, are members happy to consider and note the findings? Can I just say on the back of this that I haven't received any diversity training since I came onto the council. I never received any diversity training in 17 years in the Scottish Parliament, which is a bit disgraceful, really. I understand that in the past there has been diversity training, and I have asked officers to provide that training again for members. And I think it's quite important in assessing that training that people need to be encouraged to address their own prejudices, so that statements are not made which cause offence and distress either to other members or to members of the public. Okay. Can we therefore move on to item 11, which I'm sure people have been waiting with bated breath for, as this is the update on DG1. The report provides an update for members on actions taken since full council meeting of the 26th of September last year and the 12th of December last year in relation to the costs of completing the remedial works and bringing DG1 back into safe operation. The report contains an update on the projected costs and the programme timeline to complete the remediation project. Colin Grant and Frank Crilly are here to speak to the report, and I will open the meeting up to members' debate. I ask for questions. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's good to have a DG1 update report that's not an exempt item, and I think that there's a number of us who've been hoping to have this much earlier. I think, I certainly think, and I'm sure that as many agree, that the Council's taken the right decision by continuing with DG1. Next year we'll have a facility open for the whole of the region to use, and it will help to ensure health and well-being is achieved. The alternative suggestion from the opposition is that there should have been, DG1 should have been demolished, the decision taken at the 26th of September last year, that it be demolished and that a car park be built instead. I'm just wondering, has there been costings done which would give a rough indication of how much that would have cost in comparison to actually how much the course that we're taking now of actually having a facility at the end of next year, so that we can compare those?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Frank, are you able to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of what was discussed in 26th of September of last year, in terms of the car park option, it depends on what timelines you're looking at, but if we were to take that decision today to terminate our obligations with our existing contractor and consultants, to demolish the facility as it stands and to build a car park, there'd be pretty much parity with the approved funding that we currently enjoy to deliver the DG1 facility. So there is parity in respect to the cost there. The big difference would be that your asset would either be, you know, a national sports centre or a car park. In terms of, if you take that timeline back to the decision or the September 17 timeline, there would probably be a deficit of maybe £4 million being a cheaper option to knock down and create a car park to what we are currently delivering and working to in terms of the approved spend.
Councillor Davidson.
Thanks very much, Leader. I want to start this by saying that I warmly welcome this report, and I think that we can see from the detail that's included within it that the oversight and the management of the project is incredibly robust. Basically, every line is being scrutinised on a regular basis, and a great deal of work has been done to secure savings that are giving working capital in order to manage the project very effectively. The fact that there is a project contingency that hasn't been dipped into at all, I think, and in the context of a difficult, complicated project, which this was always going to be, it is actually a real tribute to the efforts of the officers who've been involved in making sure that this very difficult project runs appropriately, and to Mr. Crilly in particular. And I'm also grateful for the updates that he has been able to give on a regular basis to group leaders. But I also want to say something else. I'm, I guess, a notoriously patient and good-natured man. Just every so now and again, something crops up that really gets on my wick, and it was the heading, the great big banner headline in the Dumfries and Galloway Standard that said, "We told you so." And that was a source of some considerable annoyance, because, of course, up until now, we hadn't been at liberty to put the other side of the story. And the other side of the story is, of course, that when this matter was exempt, we were asked to consider a proposal that would just knock the building down, write it off as a bad job, and turn it into a car park. So, with that in mind, I asked for the high-level estimates, and the high-level estimate, if we'd taken that decision at the end of September 2017, is £14.1 million. But he spent £14.1 million of the people's money on a car park. We'd have had no facility. We might have chosen to try and extend the life of the temporary pool. We might have ended up seeking an entry in the Guinness Book of Records for how long we could extend the life of a temporary pool at an annual cost of £1.5 million. But when I see a headline saying, "We told you so," there's the other side of the story. There's the bit that wasn't being told. That has to be said in public session as well, The alternative was £14.1 million of public spending for a car park and no future facility. And I would really love to hear a member of the opposition, any member of the opposition, actually distract their attention from referenda and the McDrachma and talk about how they think that that was a good stewardship of public finances. It used to be that the Conservative Party had a reputation for fiscal probity. Locally, so far as that's concerned, I think that is in tatters today. At the budget, I said that it would be a fine thing if they stopped trying to seek or trying to send a strong message to the First Minister about referendums and actually develop some policies. With this in mind, I think, quite frankly, they want to get back to sending a strong message to the First Minister, whatever that is, because it would seem to be all they're good for.
Councillor James is next up to speak, so he may answer your question. We'll then have Councillor Wilson and Councillor Bell.
I give way to Councillor Bell first, please. Thank you.
Very kind of you, Councillor James, and obviously, Councillor Davison, you've given us your insight to the view of DG1. At the end of the day, we've never been really given the figures how much we were losing per month on that building. As that building's been shut for a period of time, how much revenue the council is losing. That needs to be answered as well, because members of the public need to know these figures.
Councillor Wilson?
I personally was going for at least we're going to have a leisure facility and not the most expensive car park in Europe across the road. But I think to confirm, I think that we've taken the right decision, and after all, it's this administration that's actually tried to get to the bottom of exactly what went wrong across there while the opposition voted against it. And it's this administration that's actually wanting to make sure we have a leisure facility in the region's capital rather than the most expensive car park in Europe.
Thank you. Councillor James?
Well, given our track record in procurement, it wouldn't surprise me if a change of decision would cost us £14.1 million, but that's not to say that's what it should cost. As I understand it, this facility was losing a lot of money when it had to close. A car park would actually probably generate funds, or could do. And have you factored that into the long-term calculation?
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Fairbairn.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, what gets on my wick, Councillor Rob, is the fact that you can actually turn around and say that you've provided leisure facilities for the people of Dumfries and Galloway. There is no leisure facilities. We haven't had them for 5 years. And the people in the first place didn't want what was proposed with DG1. They wanted a swimming pool. You know, so we've not failed to deliver on that basis as well. You know, we've deprived people in this area of 5 years without any proper leisure facilities. And you never listened to the people in the first place. Because they said no, they didn't want it rebuilt. They just wanted a swimming pool.
I think we're beginning to stray into the item which will be discussed at our special meeting when Professor Coles will come up with his report, because Professor Coles has looked into many of these issues, and we will get the opportunity to listen to hear from him on his findings and also to discuss those findings, though I would point out at that point, actually, that only one of the Conservative councillors actually agreed to the commissioning of that report. So the less, I'm certainly grateful to that member for supporting the administration on that, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the actual detail and the lessons that we have to learn, and lessons indeed that local authorities and public procurers will have to learn on procurement. But do bear in mind it was not this administration which procured DG1, it was procured by a different administration, indeed an administration of a different political makeup. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Maitland and then Councillor.
Leader, I think you've actually covered the issue. It's, I think, to request our more enthusiastic and excitable members to hold their fire for the next report, because that will be an interesting report that comes forward, and to ask whether there was anything that we needed to discuss which emerges from this report here.
Thank you, Councillor Maitland. Councillor Hislop.
Just a wee bit of clarity on some of the figures within some of the reports here. We've got the inspection check sheet for the swimming pool on page 423. Is there any reason why day one level was 9.59 millimetres and the next one seemed to be 959 millimetres, or is that just a slip of the pen? And why was it, when it was originally done, it was 1.73 metres rather than the 958? Have we reduced the depth of the pool to 95 centimetres? rather than the 1.7 metres at the other? Or did we just test at the shallow end rather than the deep end? It's just so we can understand how these tests are done.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just maybe remind full council that in terms of any water retaining vessel, there's British standards that have got to be complied with, and we are being meticulous across the road in making sure that we are compliant with said British standards. So what the report does show in terms of applying the British standards, the competition pool was filled with water for a period of 2 weeks. The first week allows for saturation, and the monitoring process takes place during the course of the second week. We also have a less than sophisticated method of measuring evaporation, because sitting alongside the filled pool is a filled bucket of water. So we check the levels of both the bucket of water, any evaporation from that, and the levels of the pool on a daily basis. If it is within the British standard tolerance, the pool passes. If it's not within that tolerance, the pool fails. The records show that when the facility was operational, we were losing massive quantities of water on a daily basis. There was continual top-up of the pools and the tanks within the wet side area. So that was having a cost in terms of the replacement of water and the replacement of heating said water. The test that we are now rigorously applying to all the water retaining vessels in the pool will ensure that there's no leakage, or the leakage is compliant with the British standards, and that will in itself produce massive efficiency savings for the building when it reopens.
Thank you. I think there's also an issue. There may be a factor of 10 between the columns on page 423 and 424 in terms of the pool, because I would imagine that the pool is not 959 millimetres, would be quite a shallow pool, really. And then becomes 1.73 metres on the next page. So it may just be an error in writing.
Chair, just again to give clarity, the minimum depth at the shallow end of the pool has got to be 1 metre to allow for competition turning.
Right.
The depth of the pool when we inherited the project was not compliant with that, and that had to be remedied as part of the works.
Councillor Hislop?
Now, if we fill the pool with water, if what I understood was right, and it's 9.59 or 959 millimetres, that's 95.8 centimetres, or 0.95 of a metre. That's less than a metre. Therefore, we're saying that the pool is still not suitable for international competition.
Frank?
Chair, if I can correct that, please. No, we're not saying that. The pool, when it is filled, the control point in the pool doesn't have to be at the 1 metre level. The starting point for the control station is at the 959 millimetres, and that's the starting point of your measure. So over the course of the period, running down the days, it went from 159 to 158. So the competition pool lost 1 millimetre in height in that period.
Chair, but if the pool is full and you have to have a metre at the turning end, 959 millimetres is not a metre.
It's a test, though. It's not actually full to capacity. It's a test, because what you're looking at is whether or not there's leakage compared to how much would be expected through evaporation. And that's a comparison.
Chair, it says on line 2 there, complete pool fill. Now, my recollection of the pool floor was it started at 1 metre and went down to about 2 metres at the far end. Now, if you're starting at the near end, at the lowest end, where to where we are just now, that was where you learnt to swim. I know, I did that, and when you got to the far end, that's where, yes, I tried to stop myself drowning. But if it's at 958, it doesn't meet the standards.
Chair, if I could again just clarify this, the competition pool is wholly compliant with the standards. The current funding depth at the shallow end of the pool is 1 metre. What this document here is referring to the control station that was set at 959 millimetres for the testing.
I think that's probably enough discussion of that particular issue. Councillor Charters.
It might just be worth reminding one of the newer members that the party in charge of the DG1 committee were the Socialists when this all happened. Now, I'm not necessarily blaming them entirely, but they were in charge at that time. So all these comments about our own party are entirely unjustified. And if you wish to continue, I can assure you I certainly can. But just remember that, where the liability lies. Now, within that... Sorry, do you want...
I thought you had finished.
No.
Councillor.
Well, but my point that I wanted to make before these slurs came up was the fact that this report here is all requiring extra money from what we originally agreed, and we were assured that all the sums were done, the estimates were correct. But if you look at 2.2, there's a the professional fee provision of 362,000. We go on to say that there's another 200,000 to be provided for inflation. We then go down to the agreed allocation of additional funding of 8.48 million, increasing the total funding to 19.300 million. We go over to considerations over the next page, where we see there's another 4.698 million required. We go on to page 11, and we find that McGowan Miller's working capital being required extra 673,835, and then an increase in working capital from 476,107. Now, nowhere is there any nowhere is it saying that these are complete, but what I'm saying is there's a pattern here of this project becoming more and more expensive, because on every one of these powers that I run out, it's all an increase to what we originally agreed. And this worries me enormously. Here we are putting up people's council taxes, we're withdrawing services, we're getting rid of the mobile libraries, and we're pouring money into this facility all the time of an increasing budget requirement. And I can assure you that the people of Dumfries and Galloway that I know within the ward all think that it is a waste of money to put all this extra spending into a leisure facility which they don't want.
Councillor Charters, I would point out, however, that the figures you quoted are not cumulative. For example, the working capital includes the 476,107, which has been saved by Mr. Crowley through his negotiations with the contractors. That has been added to further savings to create working capital, which will ensure that the construction contingency will not have to be touched. I mean, they're not cumulative, these sums of money. I actually have a question. Can I ask a question actually on similar lines? We do 3.2 mentions the value of 8.498 million, which had been allocated. Now, if I have a look at what is in the report, we commissioned work to the value of 4.698 million, although Mr. Crowley has managed to secure savings of 476,107 of those work streams. But at the moment that's been used as part of the 673,835 of working capital, which is just prevent us having to go into contingency. We also have 479,000 of work remaining to be commissioned. I understand we have the 362,000 of contingency for professional fees and 200,000 of contingency for inflation, which were agreed in September. When I add those all together, it comes to 5.739 million, not 8.498 million. I just wondered what the difference actually was, whether there's something else in there that's not...
Chair, again, maybe just to give clarity, and if the report is not wholesome in terms of communication. I can only apologise for that. From what was reported to full council in December 2017 was a working capital figure of 476,000. What we are saying is, since December 17 and March 18, we have increased that working capital to be used to meet the daily commercial pressures of the delivery, and that figure currently stands at 673,000. So we have increased the working capital. Now, what I would say on that looks a very healthy working capital, number to be moving forward with. I would caution that thought. It's too early for cigars yet because there still are daily challenges. But that does represent a positive picture in that over that period the working capital has increased. In terms of reference to additional requests for funding in respect of professional fees, as reported to full council in 2017, there was a known future liability for fees with quantum to be established. That quantum has now been established, and that's why we're asking for drawdown of that fee allocation that was made at that time. In a similar manner, in respect of inflation, back in September 17, there was a known future liability for inflation. That has now been quantified, and we are asking for release of that money. Thirdly and lastly, what we are saying is that in terms of the construction contingency that was set aside at September 2017, there is no drawdown from same, that remains intact. In terms of 3.2, the 8.498 million, it was what was the additional allocation that took up the approved funding limit to the 19.3.
But you agree that at the moment we only seem to have a commitment for 5.739 million?
Yeah, we've still got more to spend, Chair.
More than is actually included in this paper, though? Okay. Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Dryburgh, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Crilly, you mentioned in an answer to a previous question saturation when you filled the pool. Could you explain to me what I thought the pool was waterproof? Or water. Where does it go, and how much goes?
In terms of saturation, again, we are following the prescribed words within the relevant British standard that you fill the pool to allow for any saturation that may occur. And at the end of 7 days of the 7-day saturation period, you then start doing your testing. What we can see from standing beneath the pool just now is that there is no leakage from the pool.
Chair, could I just come back?
Yeah.
Sorry. Was there any saturation? Did the water level drop? And if it did, where did that water go?
You don't start monitoring the control point until after 7 days. So you fill the pool with water, and there may be a very nominal amount of saturation into the surrounding structure. And on day 8, you start to monitor your control station. And that control station is then monitored for a further week to establish if there is any loss of water from that water retaining vessel. Chair, there will be no tiles put on any walls or floors within the water retaining vessels until they have all passed the British Standard test.
Thank you. Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks very much, and I do welcome this report, and it shows that, if Councillor James reads his reports at 12 o'clock at night, Councillor Charteris reads with his eyes shut, because in 2.2 it's referenced in full council the facilitation of the finalisation of the
rude way. I do not read with my eyes shut, Councillor Murray.
I think I think it was a joke.
Yeah.
Can we continue with the substance of the
fee
discussion?
provision was referenced at full council in September 2017, and we are within that agreed budget, as I can read. And all of those other things that he mentioned are within the recommendations agreed at that particular full council as well.
Colin.
Thanks, Leader. If I may, I think notwithstanding the political debate about decisions, officers' jobs are around giving reassurance to members. This paper's a reassurance that we are implementing the decision appropriately, and indeed that the current predictions are that we will not exceed the spend that was agreed, and in fact that we certainly won't draw down on the contingency. On a slightly wider note, I think it is important to give members a reassurance that we're trying to get DG1 onto the same footing as other projects that have been delivered by this council now. Irish Street through Property Services has been a particular success. Dalbeattie now looks to be up for an international award. I was with leaders and local members yesterday at St Joseph's, where the work is outstanding quality in terms of mixing old and new. The bridge and North West Campus will be impressive, on time and on target. And what we want to do is have it come a really long way back, from a long way back with DG1, is to get us onto the same sort of footing. And we hope that this report, now in the public domain, recognises that and begins to help us to look forward to see what will be a good facility.
Thank you for reminding us of the many successful projects. It's easy to concentrate on the problematic ones without actually recognising and applauding the success. Councillor Campbell and then Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. I also welcome this report. I'd just like to make the point that we've had two debates about finances, and Councillor Dryburgh, when he mentioned about these Conservative-run local authorities in the last report or a few reports back, the mantra that keeps coming to me is this fiscal responsibility that the Tories keep going on about, and yet it's been proven time and time again they haven't got a handle on fiscal responsibility. And now we're talking about, if we did flatten this, you were talking about in September £14 million for a car park, and if we did it now in November, £19.6 million for a car park, and nothing to show for it. It's more of a statement rather than a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask whether that's half full or half empty, but at the time when this came before the full council came twice, we were encouraged to vote against the will of the people and keep ploughing on here, which the majority did. So I think we do know where we're going forward now. But at that time, one of the arguments was made that there would be design changes to it. I'm particularly interested in the ongoing costs after it's finished. Design reconfiguration to make it more commercially viable, more attractive to maybe outsource some of the facilities within it. Have there been architectural adjustments at all?
There have been some adjustments to the internal configuration to encourage and generate commercial opportunities for the authority. We are in negotiation with a third party who will bring catering to the facility. We've had a legal offer from said party, and we're in the process of formally accepting that. So there will be a franchise operation on the ground floor that will facilitate drinks and snacks and the like. We are also, has been referenced in previous papers, looking at reconfiguration of an area on the first floor to facilitate occupation from NHS to Dumfries and Galloway. So yes, we are looking at a broader picture than just leisure and sport.
Thank you. Any further comment? Okay.
Chair. Hello.
Sorry, Councillor Tate.
Yeah, just looking at, the update report number 1 here, it states that completing the remedial work and bringing the facility back into safe operation. Now, from my experience, one of the most important aspects of a building is the foundations. I just want to ask a question here. Is the foundations of this building been checked? Because, the state of the workmanship above the ground, what is the state of the workmanship below the ground?
Frank?
Chair, there is a limited amount of checking you can do in respect of the foundations in that the building is on a piled solution. That said, we do have access to the substructure area beneath the pools and the like, and the foundations, from what we can see, look competent. There is no evidence anywhere throughout the fabric of the building in terms of movement of the superstructure. So this question has been asked of our designers, and our designers believe that the foundation solution that we do have there is competent. There's no evidence to suggest any movement or cracking or otherwise.
Can I just say, is there a paper trail in this actually? Because every pour you put into a building actually, somebody has to sign the concrete off actually. So therefore, I'm asking, is it the proper concrete? Is there enough? Has there been more water put into it, or has been less water put into the pour? Be interesting to see what the paper trail says.
Chair, in terms of the current concrete, competence in terms of the foundations, I think that will be referenced in the Cole inquiry. It was something that was certainly before my time, but I'm sure that Professor Cole will make reference to elements of that nature.
Thank you. Can I, Councillor Little?
Thank you, Leader. It's just really a comment I wanted to say in reference to Councillor James' comment about the will of the people. Some Conservative members shaking their fists at a building on local newspapers, as far as I'm concerned, does not constitute the will of the people. And I'm not aware that the will of the people has actually been tested on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Much has been made.
English, sorry.
Much has been made of the cost of the car park. The car park would have cost Dumfries and Galloway Council £4 million. If I'm sure if you do your calculations, there may be officers who'll need a wee bit of help here, but the calculations would work out that Dumfries and Galloway Council would pay £4 million if it was a £14 million car park. There was a huge compensation payment came back from Kier, 9.8 million. The cost of redoing DG1 is actually costing this council 6 million on top of that. Try to reconcile that to a community council where you're telling them that the council's going to save £4,000 by offloading their town hall.
I think actually the point is that, for example, the cost of terminating the existing contract would have been around £5 million, and you wouldn't have been able to get out of that. That was the cost of terminating the contract. So that adds into the cost of your car park.
Sorry, Chair, the information that we were given was the car park would cost £14 million at the point where we took the decision last year.
Yeah, but that... Perhaps Frank can clarify that.
Yeah, Chair, in terms of, had a decision been made in September 17 or a decision made now, the strands in terms of, a different option in terms of a car park, firstly would be what's been paid in the construction contract, what has been paid to date to consultants. We then would have to terminate the contract of our contractor. We would then have to terminate the commissions of our consultants. Fifth strand would be we would have to demolish the building as it stands, and the final strand would be the construction of the car park. I think in terms of today's current estimate of that, there is almost parity with what we are spending on the DG1 facility.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I'm just, obviously car park's still an option for one party, but can we go to the recommendations?
I think that's a good idea. Yes, I think as we're straying into Professor Cole's report once again, the recommendations are, I think maybe before I say that actually, there was one final thing, which I don't think has been referred to sufficiently, is that the revised date has now been, of opening has now been brought forward to the 12th of August from October, I think it originally was. And given that the work is likely to be completed in advance, is there other savings associated with its earlier completion?
Chair, the current financials that are contained within the report capture the 10-week betterment of programme that we negotiated with the contractor.
Just before we go to the vote, can I congratulate Mr Cray for all the work he's done. I think there's been a lot of concentration in the debate on the negatives and insufficient recognition that his hard bargaining has saved this council over almost £500,000 during the time he's been taking over this contract. I think many of us feel that it's a pity that somebody like yourself had not been involved in the earlier stages of this contract, or we might not have been in the situation we are. But thanks very much to Mr Crilly and Mr Grant for all their hard work on that. Can I therefore move to the recommendations, which are that we note the construction contingency provision, so we agree to the release of the two items with respect to, well, first of all, can we just note, I think there may be divisions on this, so agree to note the construction contingency provision hasn't been used. We're content to note that. Do we agree to the release of the professional fee provision? Yes. Do we agree to the release of the inflation provision? Did I hear somebody saying no? No? Okay. Are we agreed to note the construction completion date as having been brought forward? And the quality assurance measures, and indeed the health and safety site audits, which again are very encouraging that there's been such a high standard of health and safety in the construction of this, given the nature of the building. Thank you. Item 12 relates to senior councillor positions in outside bodies. We have two issues to consider. One is that the administration wish to remove the senior councillor designation from the position of Chair of Enterprising Services Subcommittee and to designate it to the position of Chair of Pension Subcommittee in reflection of the workloads of both of those committees. Councillor Gilroy?
Thank you, Chair. I have sat on the Pension Subcommittee in a different council, and we have very good professional advice at those committees from, in my day it was Hymans Robertson, I don't know if it's changed. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I think the chair of that committee chairs a committee. I think the chair of Enterprising Services Subcommittee, if we are going to do what under the Council's financial strategy on page 334, 4.3 bullet point, maximising our income, I think the Enterprising Services Subcommittee should be doing that, and that would be a much more onerous and important chairmanship. So I would suggest that no, we do not change this.
Can we invite further comment? Councillor Dryborough?
So you're in discussions with the existing chair of the Enterprise Service Subcommittee, saw the opportunity here to look at something more onerous because of not just being a senior councillor, but being opportunity elsewhere with reviewing where he is within his work comparative. So the issue for me is if Councillor Gilroy is putting a motion forward to stay as we are, I would put the amendment that we go with the recommendations in this particular part of the recommendations.
Councillor Maitland and then Councillor Gilroy.
Interesting. I actually have a certain amount of sympathy with what Councillor Gilroy is saying. It never was regarded as such an important post that it had to be remunerated. People simply felt that they were carrying out a job, and they did it. And so I rather agree that the enterprising committee is something that needs to be tackled head on and given appropriate status. And so I think we should stick with the status quo.
Councillor Hislop?
Chair, I'm similarly minded. I think it sends out the wrong message to our workforce, whereby we don't see it as an important committee. We have a lot of staff that work for the Enterprising Services Committee, and it may be seen as, is this administration looking to outsource some of these services?
No. That's definitely not going to happen.
Thanks very much, Leader. Just picking up on Ivor's point there, I think the workforce would be more interested at as the person looking after their pension fund, which is a huge financial implication for this council and for the workforce. And if Archie's moved that amendment, then I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Ferguson, I was a bit confused what you're seconding.
You're going with the recommendations.
Right, okay. Yeah. That's, I picked you up wrongly. The only thing I would say actually is that both subcommittees, the Enterprising Services Committee is not a full committee, it's a subcommittee, as is the Pensions subcommittee. Pensions, and I didn't realise this when I volunteered myself for it, also requires a considerable amount of training. Some of the training, in fact, for the chair being in Edinburgh or even in London, it's actually a much more onerous subcommittee than I had appreciated when I put myself forward for it. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just like yourself, being vice chair of that committee as well, it's a huge responsibility, and there's a lot of money involved with this and a lot of training, and it does take a lot of time of the councillors' time to to make sure that we are doing the right thing with people's pensions, because over the years pension funds have been disappearing fast and they're in black holes or in the red or whatever. So I also would go along with the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl and then Councillor Gilroy again.
Thank you, Chair. Are you suggesting that because they're both subcommittees that neither should carry extra remuneration?
No. Councillor Gilroy.
Well, I think it's a very interesting debate here, because you either have to decide whether you want Dumfries and Galloway Council to be enterprising, that you want our staff who are working for us to be recognised for what they're doing, and that the chairman of that committee should be fully involved in what is happening and understand the potential and the problems within it. Or you look at the chair of the pension subcommittee, and I've sat on that subcommittee for many, many years, and yes, it is onerous. Yes, you do have to do your training, but we have very, very, very professional people assisting us, who we pay quite a lot of money to. And I think that that committee is well served by advice, and it's important, of course it's important, but I think to this council at this moment that the Enterprising Service Subcommittee needs to be supported and needs to be recognised. And we are not doing that if we downgrade, and that's what you're doing. You're downgrading the chairmanship of that committee. I think that sends out a really, really appalling message to people in Dumfries and Galloway, and I would urge you, as an administration, to think very carefully about what you're doing. And I would propose that we do not change, we stick to the status quo.
Well, I would disagree that the perception of the people of Dumfries and Galloway depends on the salaries that people receive. And I would also point out that actually I would hope that all committees and subcommittees get expert advice from well-qualified officials. That's, I think, how the business of this council ought to be conducted. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader, on that. And yes, on a similar point, I would just like to say, as chair of a subcommittee, I don't value my work any less than someone who is, in fact, a senior councillor in terms of their remuneration. So yes, I would just like to reiterate, the remuneration is reflecting the workload, not the importance of the committee. And certainly I would hate to feel that my role as chair of a subcommittee for the harbours is considered any less than any other chair's positions within this council.
Thank you for that. Okay, we're content. I think we'll be proceeding to a vote. So I think there is a motion not to agree to the recommendation, Councillor Gilroy and Councillor Maitland, and there was a motion to agree from an amendment from Councillor Driver to agree the recommendation, and that was seconded by Councillor Ferguson. We proceed to the vote.
So the motion is to keep the status quo with the chairman, senior councillor allowance going to the chair of the Enterprising Services Subcommittee. The amendment is to follow the recommendations as outlined in the report. Okay, Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader.
Amendment.
Councillor Bell. Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Brodie.
Abstain.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor John Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Giusti. Councillor Hagman.
Amendment.
Councillor Howie.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls.
Motion.
Councillor James. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor Little.
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor McClelland.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Scobie. Councillor Sloan.
Amendment.
Councillor Stitt.
Amendment.
Councillor Surtees.
Amendment.
Councillor Tate.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wood. What's it gone, sorry. Councillor Young.
Amendment.
The motion is carried 14, sorry, no, that's wrong. The amendment, don't get excited. The amendment is carried 21 votes to 14 with one abstention.
Thanks for that. The second issue to be considered is that Councillor Dempster has resigned from his position on Swestrans, and we are looking for nominations for the vacant position. Councillor Nicholson.
Nominate Councillor Wilson.
Seconder, Councillor Driver. Sorry. Councillor Nicholson nominated Adam Wilson, and that was seconded by Councillor Driver.
I would like to nominate Councillor Crothers. He has agreed he would to stand, although he's not here.
Okay. Thank you. Can I have a seconder for? Yeah, Councillor Blake. Have any further nominations? I presume we do that in the form of a motion and amendment again?
So we have a motion for Councillor Wilson, amendment for Councillor Crothers. Leader.
Motion.
Deputy Leader.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie. Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell. John.
Motion.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Giusti. Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Howie. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James. Councillor Johnson. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Little.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Scobie. Councillor Sloan.
Motion.
Councillor Stitt.
Motion.
Councillor Surtees. Councillor Tate. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Councillor Wood. So he's gone. Councillor Young.
Motion.
The motion is carried 21 votes to 15.
Thank you. We now move on to the minutes for approval. Can I have mover and seconder for the minutes of the Audit Risk and Scrutiny Committee of 14th of December? I think Jane, would you be? Yeah, Jane, would you move?
Yes, pleasure in moving.
Yeah.
Seconding. Am I seconding?
Councillor Gilroy, would you be prepared to second those?
No, I can't because I left midway through.
Oh, right, okay. Councillor Nicholl. Thank you. The minute of the Crichton Subcommittee.
Happy to move, Chair.
Right. Secondary.
Second.
Right. Employment and Appeals.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Harbour Sub.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Licensing Panel of 10th of November.
Happy to move, Chair. Happy to second.
Of the Licensing Panel of the 30th of November.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Licensing Panel of 25th of January.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Licensing Panel of the 13th of February.
Happy to move.
Local Review Body of the 26th of January.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Local Review Body of the 6th of March.
Happy to move, Chair.
Happy to second.
Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee the 13th of March.
Happy to move, Chair.
Happy to second.
Pension Subcommittee of the 22nd of February.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
And the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee of the 28th of November.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Thanks for that. Okay. Now, we need item 14 is to the consideration of an adoption of a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraph 6 of part 1 of the schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Are we happy to Councillor Maitland?
Chairman, I'll take advice on this, but it seemed to me as I read through these that there was nothing actually specific in here which would require that we took it in private. And in fact, actually, I think given the public interest, I think it would be helpful for the public to be able to see what is happening and why we are proposing to do what we're suggesting in here. So I'm happy to take advice on whether or not this should be taken in private and what is the need to do it in private.
Can I take advice as to where it should be exempted or not?
The reason it was requested by the department to be exempt, the request came in from the department in the relation to the fact that it was the business of another organisation. So I think we would be best pleased to ask the officer from E&I if the group, if he feels they would wish this business discussed. It was for the benefit of the organisation's business, not for the benefit of the council, that it was asked to be exempt.
Steve, do you have you advise us on this?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think Councillor Maitland's right. A lot of the
the issues in here have been aired in public. However, I think the reason for requesting that this particular request be held in private was to allow full exploration of some of the detailed financial aspects of the request that's been made, including details of the purchase arrangements that the Trust are negotiating currently, and that is the subject of ongoing negotiations.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I would support Councillor Maitland. I think this should be in the public, and as most of the figures were discussed at Nithsdale yesterday by members, I think that it would rectify a point where they may be in breach of confidentiality issues if we took it in public instead.
I think the issues which were discussed yesterday at Nithsdale Area Committee were a very different grant. Councillor Bell?
I've got to Leader, I've got to agree with Councillor Hislop. You know, I was at Nithsdale Area Committee yesterday. We gave £20,000 for a feasibility study on the building that's on subject in front of us today. I've got concerns over the figures have been the members of the press have picked up on the figures. I don't see anything confidential or sensitive. At the end of the day, you tried to close us down in DG1. You didn't want to listen didn't want members of the public to listen about DG1. Yeah. I think members of the public have got to listen about this, because this will turn into a white elephant if it's not debated.
I don't think whether or not it turns into a white elephant has anything to do with whether it's debated, but...
Public money, Chair.
So, Mr Rogers, is it still the position of the officials from EEI that this should be taken in private? Is that your advice?
Chair, I think the advice was to allow full and open discussion about some of the financial aspects of the proposed purchase and the financial position of the Trust. It might be safer to conduct that in private. However, I have no strong views one way or the other.
Can I seek no, some members are not keen to have it exempt. Can I invite members to give their views?
Chair will put it to the vote.
Councillor Brodie?
Yeah, I think it's not much different from all sort of applications to area committee where groups have got to submit their business plans, and that is open to public scrutiny as well. So I would support it being in public.
I don't think there's a strong view from people that we want to take this in private, other than to protect the organisation. I just wonder whether we could contact the organisation, just see whether they're content to have it taken in public.
I mean, it's up to members' consideration, but I think that, as we've done before, if members, I think Appendix 1 is the important factor, which sets out a bid that they're actually still got a day to negotiate. So, I mean, if members were willing, in my view, to say that the Appendix 1 would not be circulated till after the closure period, then that contains the financial information. I hardly think members are going to go into that in detail. And then that would be, because my only concern would be that does set out stuff on a thing that isn't yet concluded. And if members agreed that we would not like to circulate that till after the deal was concluded, that allowed the debate to move forward in public.
Councillor Wilson.
I would be quite happy with that course. There has been much public debate around this already. A number of the figures are in and in circulation already. It is that appendix that I would have trouble with actually being in the public domain.
Well, if we could have an agreement that the materials are not circulated prior to the date by which the organisation has to make its offer, then I see no reason why we can't continue to have this in public. Okay. That is, we now progress, therefore we will not consider that adoption of that resolution. Item 15 is any other business deemed important, and there is none. We also had, we're going to get a work plan on the South of Scotland Economic Partnership. I understand that is not yet ready and will be submitted at a later date. That has been withdrawn. And we, sorry. Okay, and if we can continue to item 17, which is the recall of the formerly exempt item on the project loan request from the Dumfries Heritage Buildings Trust which was debated at EEI last week. Can I invite Steve Rogers to give us an update on the position?
Thank you, Leader. There is some additional information which is due to be circulated to members. This provides an update on the position as at the 20th of March EEI committee. I'm conscious, given the decision that has just been taken, that one of those pieces of paper does contain potentially information that we wouldn't want to put into the public domain immediately. Essentially, the first piece of paper provides an update on the fundraising position for the trust. The second piece of paper provides some additional information about the trust itself. And the third piece of paper is really just for clarity, and this provides more definitive information about the particular building that the Trust are proposing to purchase and have approached us about to seek support for. So I'll just hold a couple of minutes whilst that information is
Can you just clarify how many pieces of paper we ought to have?
There should be 3.
So we should have 3 pieces of paper altogether. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's with regard to recommendation 2.1 before we go any further. Now, I'm struggling to see how the reasons given at 2.3 meet viable and sustainable, because there's no information other than what was not agreed at the EE&I to actually do this. So therefore, does this requisition actually meet the terms of Standing Order 18? And if it doesn't meet the terms of Standing Order 18, it should fall. Now, within the reasons here, there is no other option given other than what was defeated. In my understanding from the reading through the report, that's not a reason to bring it back because you didn't like the result. So could you just explain what is a viable and sustainable alternative to what was agreed?
I think we're about to discover that when we read the pieces of paper which are being distributed at the moment. Members like...
Sorry, Chair. At standing orders, that should have been in your requisition.
Information was received after the requisition went in.
So, if I can clarify, the decision was taken as to Standing Order 18 by the proper officer, particularly on the basis of the reasons given that members were dissatisfied that they did not receive proper legal and financial advice on which the decision could stand at the committee. So, yes, there are circumstances where we will be looking for a viable and sustainable alternative, but there are also the reasons that if a decision is thought to be unsafe, that people do have the right to recall that decision. So the sustainable alternative was that just simply that the matter be reconsidered and that it be given all the advice that members felt was necessary to make that decision. We can't have a situation where we feel we've got a decision that's been made that people feel is unsafe because they haven't got the proper advice. Advice was sought on the day, but members were not satisfied with it. So this is an opportunity to revisit that decision, to make sure full advice is given, and for members to be sure that they've made a safe decision.
Stephen, would you be able to, there are other options available in respect of funding this project. I wondered if you would be able to say a little about what other options might be available.
Well, Leader, thank you. In response to the concerns and issues that were raised at EEI committee, and in particular, a number of issues and concerns were raised about the whole notion of a secured loan. given the nature of the asset that it would be secured against. We have taken further legal and finance advice on that particular matter, and I've got my colleague from Legal Services, Julie Shannon, here this morning as well to assist with any particular questions about that. However, understanding the concerns that were expressed at the EEI committee, there appear to me to be two viable alternative approaches here. First of all, to go down the route of an unsecured loan to the group if there are issues and concerns about the nature of the asset. The second option would be to go down the route of offering the group, in order to help them to move their project forward, offering them a grant agreement funded through the department's Regeneration Capital Programme, which does contain capacity to allow us to do that for what would be a relatively small amount in the context of the wider capital programme, and might just be the way in which we could facilitate the unlocking of this project, which is going to be a complex and difficult project to move forward. But I think we've seen examples elsewhere of community-driven and community-led restoration projects which have delivered really very successful and good outcomes, and it's really something that we would be keen to support from our perspective in terms of meeting the wider regeneration objectives of the council.
Thank you. Can I invite questions from members? Councillor Driver.
Thank you very much. I mean, the reason it was called back is exactly what was said. I mean, it's more for clarity more than anything else. There were discussions on, what is the legal standing of a secured loan if the project went into, abeyance. Would that have the ability for that building actually come under the ownership of the council, and therefore have the administration, the maintenance cost of that particular one as well. So I'm pleased that information has now come forward, that further information has now come forward with the opportunity for that to go forward. Members who were at the E&I committee quite rightly challenged and scrutinised the report, although it would have been, as far as I'm concerned, a low risk option. Members decided against that particular thing. So the reason for bringing it back in here was quite clearly there were some legal and some advice that was required, which was not available actually on the day. So that's the clarity that has been why this has been brought back. I also am pleased to hear that there are potential other options which doesn't have that liability on the council, and hope other members will take up that challenge.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I think it's worth noting or looking at how this documentation was presented to EEI, not the current document we have, but the EEI document was really deficient, and it's the sort of quality of proposal that shouldn't actually come before us, and we're not doing proper due diligence. It was unclear who the partners were. There was no defined project. There was no defined footprint of where the actual property began and ended. There was a valuation mentioned, but there was no due diligence done to check that there was an event where this was put up for auction with a guide price of £95,000 and not one bid was received. And that sort of both pieces of information would have helped us to assess the value more clearly. I think usually we should be presented with a best, mid and worst case scenario. What could happen to us? I think people still today don't know if we take a security on this, does that necessarily mean we're going to acquire the building should they default? Like that to be cleared up. And I think here where there's somewhat of a blank check for legal costs, could we have some more clarity on that, please? I think we just owe it to the public, even though we're saying, oh, this is a relatively small amount of 50,000 or so. I mean, it's quite a large amount to a lot of people, and given they've got, eye-watering £400 million debts, and so I think people would expect better due diligence in the future. I just must say, I was flicking through this and the children's photographs. I was quite impressed by the optimism shown on page 67 by the class that thought they should build a leisure centre. Thank you.
We thought we were getting a car park. Councillor Bell. Councillor McCormick, then Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Leader. I'm just a wee bit concerned about the mention of the Regeneration Capital Grant Programme, because there are other communities in Dumfries and Galloway who are hopeful of such funding, and I understand we can only back one project per annum. That is my belief.
My understanding, there was sufficient money in this year's programme to enable a grant of that level. Could you maybe clarify that for us?
Leader, yes, certainly. When I was referring to the capital programme, I was referring to the Council's own regeneration capital programme. I think what Councillor McComb was referring to is the Scottish Government's regeneration capital grant fund, which we can bid into each year. There is no limit on the number of projects that we can support and bid in for. And as members are probably aware, we were successful in securing some funding through that route for the Moatbury project, as well as other projects in the region. That's only one potential funding route that the group are considering. They're also looking at Heritage Lottery Fund application, and clearly we'll be trying to advise them and guide them through that process as they move into the next stage of the development of their project.
Thank you. And any grant aid would not jeopardise any other community project. You can give that reassurance. Councillor Bell, followed by Councillor Blake.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, read a bit about the community survey. 324 people have been interviewed regarding what we'd like to see in the building. So residential uses, a cinema, soft play, trampoline park. These things have been turned down in the past by the council. We've got a lot of restaurants and cafes. That's interesting. Once again, that's flagged up. We've got the Gracefield Arts, which is doing well, which is part of the communities committee. We've got all these items in Dumfries at the moment, but what concerns me, we're putting a lot of money into a lot of projects this council. As Councillor James has just said, we're over £400 million in debt. I've got concerns, we've blown enough money into the White Sands, the DG1 disaster, this could be the DG2. And at the end of the day, it's a listed building, and it's very, very difficult, what we can do in plan restrictions or change in detail. And I've got concerns that the council's going to be wasting more money into a project that doesn't belong to us.
Councillor Blake and Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a lot of sympathies with this. I would really love to see this building come back into use. I do also have concerns about us inheriting it should the loan not be able to be repaid. I'd just like to ask 2 points. One, the paper initially says a loan of £50,000. The paper we've got today shows the shortfall is now 37,000, less another 7,000 to 9,000, which would take it between 28,000 and 30,000. So, first of all, is that the proposal, that it's no more than £30,000 loan? And secondly, in relation to the grant suggestion, that would maybe give us a lot of protection if we did go down that line, and that we don't inherit the building should this project fail.
Steve.
Leader, yes, if I can just clarify, the 37,000 shortfall is what they are now asking for support for. So that supersedes the 50,000 that they asked for originally. The reason they're asking for 37,000 is the reference to gift aid. That's currently unknown and uncertain about the timing of them being able to reclaim that. So in order to provide them with the cover to allow them to complete the purchase, they're requesting the 37,000 towards the purchase.
Councillor Beck.
Yeah, it's the gift aid element. I think that no matter what option we did decide to go down, or in fact if we refused it, if we did go down, there should be a way that we get that money back and not have to wait to the end of the 3-year period. I think that would really need to be worked into. But I'm still favouring the grant rather than a loan.
Thank you. Could I have Councillor Brodie followed by Councillor Charters?
Thanks, Leader. I'm really concerned about the proposal to take the money from the regeneration grants, capital grants. Those who were present at the EEI committee last week would remember that I asked about Anne High Street. I said there's £17,000 in the capital budget for this year to do a consultation process with the people of Anne about the improvements to the High Street, but there's no money this year or the next year in the capital programme to develop the ideas which the public come forward with. I said, can we include some money next year to develop this programme? I was told no, there was no opportunity. I said, when would the opportunity to get money put in the programme? And I said, there is no opportunity at the moment. So the chairman of the committee will remember that. I think it would be wrong if we push this project in Dumfries forward. I'm quite willing to support an interest-free loan for this project, but certainly not for overstepping the mark in the capital programme.
Well, Leader, the information that I have is that there is £280,000 of unallocated funds within the Regeneration Capital Programme. I wasn't privy to the discussion at the EEI committee, but I do know that there will be a report brought to EEI looking at the detailed project allocations for next year later on in the current year.
Do you want to come back in?
Just to say this is not the information that was given by officials when I asked that question at the EEI committee.
Councillor Charters, followed by Councillor Maitland.
Chair, my worry is the open-ended nature of this loan, which could end up with the council owning the building. We're trying to get rid of a whole series of old buildings, lists of them at the moment, and I can see absolutely no reason why we should put money out to acquire another one. I mean, we're selling off all these buildings for £1 here and £1 there, all over the place. And now we're saying we're going to buy, or potentially receive another old building because of a result of a loan. The purchasing is interesting in this thing. It says it's important to put it because it's in Dumfries town centre. It's not in Dumfries town centre at all. It's the other side of the river, and it's never been part of the town centre over there. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be development in that area, but it is not part of the town centre and therefore should not be considered for that reason. Now, when I look at the £30,000 which this architectural committee has said that they have, I note that 30,000, out of the total money they've had, 30,000 of this money is in pledges. It's not money which has been received, it's in pledges. Now, that doesn't mean to say they're going to get the money, and it's wrong to include it in their list of the money which they've received. They've not received it. And that again adds a danger that if they don't receive it, and it has to be concluded today, this agreement, they have to buy it today. If they don't buy it today, it falls out of they don't get it, which may be our easy way out. But we could have offered them today that amount of money, and we would end up, if they buy it and then default, on owning this building. The building itself, if you look at the map, is only about a third of the total area of Rosefield Mills. And nothing in here shows what's going to happen to these other two-thirds. What's it going to be? All this sort of idea of converting it into play parks and restaurants and everything else, surrounded by what looks like a sort of a scrap merchant's yard, all round the outside of it. It's a much bigger task.
I've got several members wanting to speak.
Right.
Sorry, are you not finished yet? No, sorry.
the problem, I'll leave it on that we've already given £10,000 from Nithsdale Area Committee. Yesterday, another £20,000 was given from Nithsdale Area Committee. They're now asking for this committee for another lot. I know of no other organisation we would even consider to have 3 large dollops of money within 10 days. I mean, I can't understand why it's got so much traction, this thing. We've got money needed to be spent all over Dumfries and Galloway, and not in this particular building, for which we have no security, and we could end up owning a pig in a poke.
Okay. So you have several members wanting to speak. Councillor Maitland, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Hagman, Councillor Lever, Councillor Davidson, Councillor Nicholl and Councillor James. So, Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Leader. Well, we certainly need an answer to Councillor Charteris's question about what the actual legal facts are with respect to the loan. I mean, I'm quite sure we need to have that. I looked at this and I think I understand members' caution and care about this, but I also think that at the moment you have a large building of good quality, which is very similar to mills in Lancaster and Carlisle, which are being developed for these sorts of purposes, which have been listed out here, and you're at the very beginning of a journey. If we leave this building to sit as it is, it's sitting opposite your flagship, historic lottery funded Dock Park. It doesn't add to the attraction of that area at all. And I would say to members, it's in my experience that the council has found itself, when you have a dangerous building, lumbered with looking after that dangerous building and then having to chase round after the owners in order to do something about it. So, I mean, I think there is a danger in derelict building in the centre of town. And you've got behind you, it seems to me, a fair wind as far as the community is concerned. Thank you, Councillor Charteris, for explaining it's not actually money in their hot hand, but there is at least a will to suggest that they want to support this project, and I think that needs to be called in. So I don't know whether we can actually tie that into anything that we might offer, but we certainly need an answer to the loan question, and my instinct is that it would be a mistake not to support this.
Is there an answer on the issues about the loan? There's obviously 2 different types of loan. One would be a secured loan and one would be an unsecured loan, and there's also the possibility of a grant. But the concerns, I think, around the loan were a secured loan in case it reverted to the council if they were unable to service the debt.
Yes, certainly, Leader. If I can try to provide some clarity on that, and perhaps Julie can help me out here. The situation with regard to the secured loan proposal, can I just be absolutely clear here? There's absolutely no intention for us as an organisation to sleepwalk into acquiring this building. The issue about security is a standard approach that is taken by the council to protect its own position when it comes to issuing loans of this nature. Now, it could be that, given the particular circumstances here, the building is considered to be more of a liability than an asset, and therefore the issue of security should be considered maybe quite differently to how we would under standard normal circumstances. However, we should also add that taking out the security, insisting on the security, does not place the council under any obligation to exercise that right and to take ownership of the building should the group at some point in the future be in default in terms of repayment of the loan. So we would still have a choice to make further down the line as to whether we actually chose to exercise that option. And given some of the issues and concerns about taking on such a building, I would think it's highly unlikely that we would exercise that. However, it does put us into a stronger negotiating position should difficulties arise in the future. Julie, is there anything that you want to add?
No, Chair, I think Steve has explained it quite clearly. because we take a security, it does not necessarily mean that we will end up as the owners of that building if they default. That's sort of the worst possible scenario. It's our security, and we're in charge of that security, so it's up to us as a council and as a lender to decide what we want to do in that regard.
Thanks for that clarification. Councillor Wilson, followed by Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader. I'm struggling to get over and recognise that the negativity coming from the Conservatives on this. You know, we quite often see that talking about, you know, trying to regenerate and improve Dumfries, and they're not interested in supporting a community group who are doing a lot of fantastic and hard work in trying to trying to improve this building. And I think as well, we've got the Theatre Royal and Moatbrae, which are seeing actually older buildings being brought up to a modern standard and being used and recognised and used by the community. And of course, Moatbrae was near the final stages of being able to be used by the community. So I think as well, it's interesting about this grant, and I would therefore like to propose, looking at the EEI recommendations that were put last week, that we take 2.1 to 2.4 as they were, remove 2.5 and instead make that to agree that Dumfries and Galloway Council provides the DHBT with a grant of £37,000 and remove 2.7 and add in another recommendation that this council confirms full support for the project going forward.
Well, there are a number of councillors who actually want to speak first, so I wouldn't, I'm not going to take the motion yet because there are a number of people who wish to take part. We'll just, can I now go on to Councillor Hagman, and followed by Councillor Lever, and then Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to thank the officers for bringing this back, because there were quite a large number of unanswered questions at committee last week, which, as rightly so, we as members on those committees scrutinised the papers, and unfortunately the answers weren't able to be given. So thank you for coming back and for the clarity on this. I would also like to say that, there was discussions in the previous items about listening to the will of the people. Now, the will of the people have backed this project enormously. There's huge amount of pledges coming forward. So, my understanding looking at this project is there's a huge will of the people that we support this, and certainly I would go forward in support of the project. I was just wanting clarity on the security, but I think that answer has been given, so I won't go over it again. But I just want to say that I'm really pleased that this has come back and given us the answers which weren't able to be given last time down. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's certainly the information from Steve and Julie have been very useful, and it's a pity that information hadn't been available at the EEI committee when it was decided before. Councillor Lever, followed by Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Chair. Not surprisingly, much of what I was going to say has already been said, so I won't bore the council with repeating it again. But several years ago, we invested £2 million together with Heritage Lottery funding in Dock Park. Well, Dock Park, when I first came down here, was very, very run down. Now it's absolutely thriving. It's full of kids, people walking dogs, etc. And quite often you hear people say, "That's a beautiful building on the other side of the river. What a shame it's been allowed to get into the state it is." And it is a very beautiful reminder of Dumfries and Galloway's historical industrial past, and I don't think we can allow it to fall apart. So I would happily endorse what Adam was suggesting if he's prepared to move it.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd rather agree with Jane Maitland and indeed with Adam. I think there are definitely things we can learn from this. Of course, officers would assess the request that was made to them, because that's the request that was made. But I think we need to consider whether a loan is the best option in all cases, and particularly when we're looking at very ambitious, but community-led regeneration. I think we also need to consider whether it's the sort of project we wish to support, and there may or may not be a difference of opinion on that today. In my view, I think that it is. It obviously presents risks. I think that the suggestion of a grant minimises those so far as the council is concerned, and I would reflect that effectively taking the grant alone, rather than the area committee decisions, which are a separate matter, we are being asked to venture rather less than the people of Dumfries have already put their hands in their pockets to the tune of. We're not even matching it. It would seem to be quite a modest contribution to what is potentially a very large and very significant project. I'd also reflect on, and Councillor Maitland will recall this, and Councillor Gilroy as well, there are many other projects which have needed assistance and a bit of belief in their early stages. I think Kirkcudbright Art Gallery is actually a good example. Very different circumstances, very different indeed, but certainly required a fair amount of lateral thinking and a good deal of determination and resolution along the way. It opens in the summer, and from everything that I have heard, is going to exceed the standards we were led to expect in terms of its quality, and it will be a real asset to the region. I'm not sure that when we started considering that particular project, even though we hoped that might happen, that we were necessarily certain that it would make it. And I think many of these projects, particularly the regeneration of old buildings, will fall into that same category. That's the point that we're at here. But I think we also need to consider that we are getting a huge amount for the people's money in this regard, because remember, we're being asked to commit some modest funding to support this. The heavy lifting is going to be done by volunteers. Volunteers and their professional advisors, of course, but fundamentally there's a group of public-spirited people who see this, this missed opportunity, this evidence of market failure, and want to do something about it. I think we should help them out.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson, and I would also, maybe we could also reflect on the issue of Moat Bray, because when Moat Bray originally was proposed, I thought it was a wonderful idea, but I didn't see how they would ever really be able to do it. And now look at it now, we're going to have something of which we can be extremely proud. The council offered support, but it was a group of volunteers who did all the hard work to make that into reality. And sometimes you just have to have a bit of trust and a bit of support to take the sorts of things forward that we would all, I think, ultimately want to see. I've now got Graham Nichol, followed by David James, Ian Blake, Richard Brodie, Jane Maitland, Ivor Hislop, and Patsy Gilroy. And I think maybe after that we'll complete, shall we? Okay. Councillor Nichol.
Thank you, Chair. My concerns at the EEI committee were on the fact that we were going to be left with the possibility of being left with a building which we would then become responsible for. We have no idea what's in that building. I took a turn down the other day and had a look at it, and it's not a pretty sight. It is an iconic building, I'll grant you that, and it would be good to see something done with it. But Councillor Davidson mentioned the heavy lifting by the locals, by the volunteers, etc. The heavy financial lifting is going to be done, according to what I've read in here, by the Heritage Lottery Fund, to the tune of 5 million or something along those lines. Now, we have no guarantee that they will get that, and that was one of my concerns. And if they don't get that Heritage Lottery Fund, this is going to fall. And that Heritage Lottery Fund, at the moment, they've got 1% roughly of the population supporting it. My understanding is the HLF require at least 10% of the local population to back a project before they will fund it. Also, in our ward, in the Mid-Galloway area, we had a Heritage Lottery Fund which right through to the last stage, and it was turned down. And the main reason for it being turned down was that there were adequate facilities within the community that this wasn't needed. Now, we've no guarantee that we'll get to that stage with this, and the same thing won't happen, that there aren't adequate facilities within Dumfries and the area, and the HLF could turn it down. These are my main concerns. Councillor Davison also mentioned the Kirkcudbright Art Gallery. It is a great project. I had the privilege of being shown round it a fortnight ago or so. I think you were there, Rob, were you? And it is a great project, and good to see it coming near completion, and I understand it's opening in June, 9th of June or something like that. But I have great concerns about this, and I just would like to have seen them a bit further down the road with the HLF. We've got our backs to the wall here. We have to come up with this money today, or this purchase fails. That's basically the situation. And I don't like being bucketed into a single corner, to put it in agricultural parlance. And that's roughly where we are at this minute. If we don't come up with this, it fails. And I am apt to look for alternatives when I'm put into that position. I don't like being cornered like that, and I am not happy about this at all.
A number of colleagues wishing to speak. Can we keep our remarks brief? Because I think a lot has been said. We're going a wee bit round the houses again now. So let's, if people will make brief comments, and then we'll have a proposal from Councillor Wilson, which I would like us to consider after that. Councillor James, followed by Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think with debts of 400 million, we probably should be careful when we accuse people of negativity when they're just doing due diligence and scrutiny. Example, last year we had a collection of artists, we just gave them 120,000 go. I think those days are over. We need to be more careful with our money. So I really welcome the fact we now got clarity on the issue secured loan. We've seen more detail here. That's very helpful. The EEI presentation was, in my opinion, substandard. It's a risky project. It's been pointed out by Councillor Nicholl there. There's a chance that this building is actually today worth a large minus. HLF probably would be looking for more than 300 or 400 people to support it in percentage terms of the population around it. However, it's maybe thinking about what Councillor Blake said, that if we could somehow pare this amount down a little bit further to the minimum, because I think they're receiving funds all the time, it's probably not the full 50,000 that they need. I have that question. Then if we could get that down, then I probably wouldn't be opposed to actually granting the money and taking a risk on something that could be very worthwhile.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. First, a couple of points. First of all, I did take exception to Councillor Wilson's comment about the negativity of the Conservative Party. I'm not a member of EEI. I did speak on this today, and I thought I made it quite clear how supportive I was to bring the building forward. And I think, if not the first, I was certainly one of the first to go down the lines of the grant towards this. With that in mind, I'm quite prepared to second Councillor Wilson's suggestion if he would add in that they have some mechanism of repaying the gift aid element where it has recovered. In other words, it brings it down to under 30,000. I appreciate we would need to put forward the 37,000 just now to allow the sale to go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Bro.
Thanks, Leader. I'm very supportive of this project, but I think we will be going down the wrong way, the road here. We've heard from our solicitor, Julie Shannon, and I think that takes away the concerns that we're going to be landed with another white elephant. And I think the proposal to just give them the money has not been thought through, because probably, I don't know whether it was made before we got this advice. Maybe we should backtrack and look at the loan again. I don't think that the grant procedure has been properly followed. I don't think any other group could just come and present a proposal at a council meeting for money, because I think we've got to be seen to be doing due process. And also, if we do go ahead with a grant, I would certainly like an assurance that a report went to the ENI about the Annan situation, because we feel that we're being bypassed in this. So I would like an assurance that a report would go on the Annan High Street one. Yeah. But we don't have an improved town centre. So I'd like an assurance of that, Leader, if we go to grant. But I'd certainly support that. I would certainly propose as an amendment that we go ahead with the interest-free loan.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Councillor Brady has covered the points I was going to make. The principle of council help, I think, is getting to be agreed. I think we haven't covered the procedures for the grant. It's not come anywhere, and we haven't been able to evaluate other proposals. I'm very happy to second his proposal for a loan on the terms of the way that we have been advised with respect to avoiding liability and finding it landing in our laps.
Can I just clarify that you're talking about a secured loan? Unsecured. Or an unsecured loan? Yeah, secured loan. Hislop, and then Councillor Gilroy, and then we'll proceed to motions and amendments.
Chair, I have a wish to see this building redeveloped, but I have concerns about the fact that we're actually taking a small group to actually take this forward. I don't know if they have the ability to deliver on what's going to be, I would think, over £5 million worth of expenditure. And I took the opportunity to go online and have a look at what they've done in the past. Now, as far as I can see, the DHBT has been involved in 2 previous projects. One was to save some listed buildings in the Vennel. They were demolished, and there's new housing going up there just now. And the other one that I could see that they were involved in was a taxi cab stands at the station, which was a listed building. My understanding, that's been demolished. And I wouldn't like to think that we're investing in the wrong people here to deliver this project, and we're going to end up in the same situation where this building will be demolished. It doesn't give me a lot of comfort where they expect not to get the money, in one of the lines they have, the loan to be over 3 years to allow for possible applications which are to be expected, rejections which are to be expected. Now that's in page, oh sorry, it doesn't have page, Appendix 1, under requested loan terms. Now, when you've got someone who's setting themselves up to fail, that's where I would say it is. I have concerns about this. Now, I spoke to a man who knows a man who's done a survey of this building. It was just a walk round one. His advice was, if you do any work in here, the best thing to do was to demolish it. Now, to say it's an outstanding building, I don't know if this building's structurally sound. Is this building full of asbestos? You know, and if it's full of asbestos, they go bust. We've given them money, whether it's secured or unsecured. We'll be expected to actually come along and tidy this situation up. It's just these concerns that worry me about giving the money just now. And I think there was wise words said before by Councillor Wilson. Has the costings been done for this to see what the refurbishment of this building is going to cost? I don't see any of those costings. It could be 10 million, not 5 million. We don't know. And to be honest, I'm concerned at that we don't actually have anything there to say it's going to be X to fix it, and this is what we'll deliver at the end of it.
Councillor Gilroy?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Hislop has said. My concerns are that it's been rejected already by the Scottish Land Fund because it's asset-led. Heritage Lottery Fund also do not like things that are just asset-led. They just don't want to put money into something because people like a building. The building has got to have a reason. And when it comes to Moat Bray, it was a project. When it comes to the Art Gallery in Kirkcudbright, it was a project. Eventually, the Johnson School in Kirkcudbright, it succeeded because it has a project that's viable and sustainable. The problem with this is that it doesn't. And I think there is huge problems from there getting any heritage lottery funding. I hope I'm wrong, because I would love to see that building up and running, because I think it's rather beautiful. What I would like to see, I was the person that put forward that we didn't support it at EE&I, and on that day I would stand by that decision because I think it was the right decision. We're slightly different here today, and I think it's a grant we ought to be doing and let them get on with it. I don't think we should have any responsibility for that building whatsoever, because it will come back to haunt us. I can guarantee that just about. So I think a grant of the 37,000 that they need, wish them well, send them on their way, and let's hope we've helped to do something. And that's what I would be happy to support at this time. But with reservations, I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Gilroy. So, Councillor, you have a proposed motion.
Yeah, I think Councillor Lever seconded it, but my motion was on the original EI report that was presented last week would be to take 2.1 to 2.4, remove 2.5, amend 2.6 to agree that Dumfries and Galloway Council provides the DHBT with a grant of £37,000 and remove 2.7 and add a further recommendation that this council confirms full support for the project going forward.
And we also have an amendment from Councillor Brodie.
Yes, amendment is that we proceed with an interest-free loan on a secured basis.
And that was seconded by Councillor Maitland.
If my colleague would allow me, I don't see any reason not to go for 212234, as we've agreed. I think we can all agree with that. The £37,000 is obviously the figure that we've got to put in 2.6. So we simply amend 2.6 to be £37,000. And I think we also would like to confirm full support for the project as well.
Councillor Blake, you had a further amendment, did you?
I did. I asked if Councillor Wilson would consider the addition to his proposal. He's decided not to, so I would like to put in a counter amendment that we do award the grant initially of £37,000, but we have a mechanism to recoup the grant, the gift aid element, as soon as it's received back.
I don't think they're going to agree yet. No, they're not going to agree yet. Is there a seconder for that? Yeah, that's part of that. The advice is how we have a motion and 2 amendments. Maybe you have some advice as to how we take that.
Yes, we do. The counter amendment goes up against the amendment first as a vote.
Okay.
And then once we have a result from that, the winning choice will go up against the motion. Okay.
Okay, right. So could you read those out just for clarification?
So to remind you that the counter amendment is Councillor Blake's proposal that initially they get the grant of 37k, but that would include a provision to recover anything that was brought in virtue of grant aid, so that tonight reduced to around the 2930 that's in their business case. Yep.
It's a gift aid.
Sorry,
Gift aid.
Gift aid. Yeah. The amendment is that there be an interest-free loan, but on a secured basis. And it follows, and the rest follows the recommendations that were in the E&I report. Okay. So we've got...
Sorry, there's an amendment and a counter amendment at this point, and then they would go up against the motion.
Yeah. So the counter amendment is that it's a grant of 37k, but that the grant, the gift aid element could be recovered. The amendment is that it's an interest-free loan that is secured, albeit that we might not call up that security, but it gives us something there. And the motion that will then come on to is to go with Councillor Wilson's proposal for the straightforward grant. Okay, but at the moment we're going to vote on the counter amendment and the amendment. Okay.
The amendment being the secured loan and the counter amendment being the recouped grant aid, gift aid. Okay.
Okay. Leader.
Abstain.
Deputy Leader.
Abstain.
Councillor Bell. Oh, he's gone, sorry. Councillor Blake. Councillor Brodie.
Amendment.
Councillor Dougie Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor John Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dryborough.
Abstain.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Abstain.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Giusti.
Counter.
Councillor Hagman.
Abstain.
Councillor Howie. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James. Councillor Johnston.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Abstain.
Councillor Little.
Abstain.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Abstain.
Councillor McClelland.
Abstain.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Abstain.
Councillor Nicholl.
Counter.
Councillor Nicholson.
Abstain.
Councillor Sloan.
Abstain.
Councillor Stitt.
Abstain.
Councillor Surtees. Councillor Tate. Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilson.
Abstain.
Councillor Young.
Abstain.
The amendment is carried 8 votes to 7, and there were 19 abstentions.
Thanks. Can you remind us now what the motion is and the amendment?
The amendment is the interest-free loan that is secured on the property, and the motion is to proceed by way of a grant, both for 37,000. Yep. Leader.
Motion.
Deputy Leader.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Brodie.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell, Doogie Campbell. Councillor John Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Giusti. Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Howie. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Little.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Sloan.
Motion.
Councillor Stitt.
Motion.
Councillor Surtees. Councillor Tate. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Councillor Young.
Motion.
The motion is carried. Motion is carried 25 votes to 9.
Thanks very much, and may I wish everybody a happy Easter. Enjoy your couple of days off.